I'm waiting for Yosef and Yoav and Jacob to um, come on where we can continue our lively conversation. Hello, sir.
Hello,
You doing well?
all is well.
I'm glad to hear. I was talking to Yosef on the back end on Discord um, because I want the conversation to be productive. Uh, but
Good.
not unfortunately, just it's very hard, and perhaps you'll help me. But this also has to do with the video that you showed us of Doug Wilson, which to me that's like full of religious language and a theological frame, which is like something that I was sort of discussing this morning. Which
Yeah, it must be. I mean, on what basis will we have a discussion if not on a religious basis? I mean, are you going to refer to basic humanistic common principles? I mean, if we are anti-Semitism, why is anti-Semitism even bad? You have to have a common background of principle. It has to be religious. Otherwise, you end up Sam Harris, and Sam Harris has shown us where the Sam Harris way leads to.
hello, Mark. I hope you're doing well. Um, are you sure conversations can ever be productive? Maybe it can cause actions which would be, but most people don't do things. You are correct. Um, many people are just talk, or as we say, do they talk the talk, but do they walk the walk? Um, that's a very big question. Right now we're speaking. One second. Anti anything is identifying against. It's always bad. However, what are Semites? I have a cold. My voice is fresh. Otherwise, doing okay. I got you. What are Semites? You're pointing to a good point, which I was sort of discussing again with Yosef. Which these are great questions because when you're dealing sort of with the Jews, right? It starts with like, what are the Jews? Right, and that's not necessarily the road I want to go down to, but you have to be like, what are the Jews? What are their belief system? What's their theology? What do they want? Um, and of course, it also has to do with the America First idea. So I uh, I want to avoid arguing with Jacob about. I'm not trying to convince him to become a Zionist, but I also feel like it's unavoidable. Like that framing is unavoidable at this point. Um,
What is Mark's point?
But
That we should not
people treat
have
conversation
conversations,
can
or
be productive,
should we
which
have?
did one party convince the other about something or something? Is it generative, as you and Manuel like to say, which is a good way of expressing it? One would hope in this conversation, we're hoping unfortunately we can't be proactive, but we need to be reactive to something that we see happening in the world, which is relevant to, let's say, our circles. We're being discussed in our circles, and then we also in this TLC Jordan Peterson sphere world, right? What specific Jews think about that and how they think the community is reacting to that. So, do we think it can be productive? I think it can be productive. Will it be productive? Yet to be seen. What are your thoughts on what our sages said? The redemption of Israel will come through the study of the Zohar.
I need to study the Zohar to answer that.
Right. Well, al regel achat, to say on one foot. If you read the Zohar, you will notice that there's many different. There are different narratives being offered, and some of them contradict each other as well. And I think that's a feature, not a bug, right? I think built into it, this part of the secret of the Zohar is telling you things from different perspectives. You have to understand things from a different way of looking at them, and that's why I think the redemption of Israel will come through the study of the Zohar, with creating more vantage points and more ways of analyzing and looking at the world and seeing how me and you together, and in that space between, only if I could see all those things can I actually start building a picture of what, quote unquote, Israel looks like, God looks like, redemption looks like. So then yes, then I think the study of the Zohar could bring redemption. But that's not really the conversation that we're having right now. One second, this might be related. Jacob called anyone who disagrees with Jesus woke, right? Anti-Semitic. So there's that, right? But I think you've been here long enough to take some of what Jacob says, salt, then another few more grains, and sprinkle a few more grains on top.
Well, I told Jacob that he has been quite a number of occasions. He's been a Jeremiah in the TLC, and he was much of a fire and brimstone prophet, and nobody listened to him. It didn't help him in any way. It didn't promote any of his views. So, yeah, a priori, people will not change their mind. People will not repent.
Well, that's always the question. I mean, I mentioned this to this group of that father and son, that father and daughter duo that we were talking to. But what would you need to hear to sort of change your mind? Even, and that's, I feel like no one's really ever ready to answer that. Is there a link, same as yesterday? Oh, why is there not a link on the thing? Sorry, I just need to send it to you. Safe. Copy.
Well, to Mark, it was perhaps a purpose of this meeting to demonstrate to you that there is, in fact, anti-Semitism. Yes, there are always people crying wolf. There was an intention to draft a bit of a leaflet that will perhaps convince you that in this case there is some anti-Semitism going on. We haven't drafted it yet. I don't think we are actually going to. You have to do your own research.
But specifically, Mark, what's productive is, what would be productive is, for people to see, and I think you have mentioned this in the last stream, but just to see that for different Jews themselves, even though it's like, many Jews, many different ideas, but really to see it not as a monolith. That's number one, right? As far as what Jews, and even what Zionistic Jews, and even what religious, non-religious, whatever that means, Jews as well, or not observing Jews as well, can agree and disagree. So that's number one. Number two, if we could agree together with these different aspects or these different from these different vantage points and perspectives, can we agree that we're identifying slang that's problematic? And if we can identify slang problematic, then we think we should call it out and frame it properly. However, you are engaging in what you are witnessing right now is part of that. I guess you would even say a Talmudic praxis where we're taking out an idea and we're really dissecting it and looking through it and discussing it. And many times that could even be somewhat heated. Yosef. Are you with us, sir?
I think so.
And how's your microphone?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to work on. Oh, can you not hear me still?
I hear you.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so the new one's still. I couldn't get the new one working. It won't. It's not working on my computer, and I can't get it to go through the phone. So.
Okay, so there's a lot of comments, but for right now, I'm putting that aside. Even though you guys are obviously welcome to comment away and enjoy the conversation in the comment section, and perhaps maybe we'll also add a link later. But right now, we want to sort of keep it relatively focused. And we should get into it, and obviously Jacob could jump in as well. But Yosef, I'm just continuing if you don't mind, and then you could take it to any direction you want. Really, at that point, you and I were having a discussion that I was letting Yosef, Yoav, I was filling in about how I don't see how we could avoid sort of a conversation which is has like theological framing, because even in our needing to be reactive, I just think there's so many undergirding questions which ultimately point to like a religious question, and I was hoping either you could assist us or me in guiding that conversation, or do you think I'm fundamentally wrong or wrong enough and we lost him? I insulted him, he left us, he couldn't handle the truth, he's a spy, he was involved in the Liberty, it's all him. Okay, while we're doing that, I'm going to go back into the comments over here. And if you're not allowed, a lot of people claim that anyone says anything negative about someone who happens to say they are Jewish. Do people scream to them? See the issue. It's why. I'm not sure. Yosef.
Try that again.
Where'd we lose you?
Something about me being a spy.
Okay. I guess, we want it to be productive. We're thinking about this together right now. We're also thinking about, like you were saying, in our community, in the TLC, is this something that we need to sort of speak out about, that we're seeing slang rear its head, or something appear, or seems to us potentially as anti-Semitic or problematic. Maybe not. We could discuss that. And I'm having a hard time, as we were seeing this morning, I guess, decoupling this from like a theological frame. And I feel like the parties involved that are also the problematic ones, we'll call them, let's say right now, Nick Fuentes and Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, for example. I could be wrong about this, right? We could also have a separate argument, which is like how much of this is actually bots and fake noise, but like these voices that we hear out there, right? I ultimately see them sort of, there's a religious or theological underlining narrative underneath there, which is like sort of even questioning who we are or what is this Jew, and then when it comes to Boyce, that has to then be a question and how this was related. He said Jordan Peterson specifically was being sort of soft on Israel when he was coming over here, and how he saw Israel and how he was sort of and specifically in this conflict, how he was reacting. And he discussed over there about, like, someone needing to put Israel in their place. And I think he relates to, like, sort of the gatekeepers over here. And I'm just adding one more point because this relates to the conversation with Christian Baxter. I sent Christian Baxter this video of Jordan Peterson speaking in Jerusalem and, like, crying over here, talking about, like, the mountain of the hill and the Jewish people. And then I sent him this other video of Jordan Peterson and Douglas Murray speaking, and Douglas Murray pointing out to him that, like, the verse of, like, turning the swords into plow fields, and there's going to be peace. And then Douglas Murray goes and points out to Jordan Peterson that the verse beforehand is that the Torah will come from Jerusalem. And Jordan Peterson looks at him and says, like, that's a prerequisite. Now, that's a theological framing. That's seeing something, and right. So now I'm taking that and I'm saying into our conversation here, right? Mm-hmm. No one has to become a Zionist. That's not what I'm saying right now. What do you think the best framing is? Because I'm having a hard time moving past that, because I feel like we could talk about why Jews were involved in Hollywood because they were shunned out of other things. But I look at that as just another data point of ultimately in the story of the Jews and what we're sort of, how we're manifesting in the world. Of course, we were in Hollywood and we were in the story makers, and, like, that's how these things sort of unfold. And as where we are today, looking back at it, it would be hard to ignore that to people and say, like, we didn't have influence. But the floor is yours.
So I think there's like two different conversations here into some level, because yes, when Jordan Peterson is reading, like, experiencing Israel through the Bible, and in a way that's, like, very kind of Protestant dispensationalist, to, like, at least at a surface level, right? Like, he's gonna kind of cherry picking verses and, like, kind of reading them into his experience as he's, like, walking the land, and but especially, like, without the full context. But and then he's happy to hear more of the context, but, like, it's not how he's, like, initially operating, and kind of seeing that. I mean, I think no question that he's approaching it kind of from that world. He's not approaching it necessarily from, like, a different Christian theological kind of narrative, which is, like, Christian nationalism, right? The Doug Wilson narrative. Like, that's a different way to do it theologically. It's also Christian, not the same. And I mean, Fuentes seems to have his own kind of Catholic version of that, a Catholic ethnic version of Christian nationalism that he's sort of less systematically, I'd say, put forward, but is certainly there in his in various parts of the places he spoke. So those are theological, but in, like, the overall umbrella, and you're probably going to say, well, that's just a data point. But, like, I think the overall umbrella of, like, America, federal government supporting the state of Israel from, the late 70s, early 80s, basically, right, when there was this kind of merger, mostly starting with Begin and the conservatives, American conservatives. Like, there certainly was some theological components to that. But I don't think the umbrella, the container, was theological necessarily. I think there was a lot of, Cold War, like, very pragmatic kind of realpolitik concerns going on. There was ideological concerns with, democracy and communism, but there was also just, like, how are we going to fight proxy wars in this region? And, like, yeah, Israel has this weird mixed history of the kibbutzim and socialism, but at the same time, like, it could serve as kind of this, well, what I call it, bridge for America to kind of do things in the Middle East. And that's not theological, right? Like, and I have this sense that one could frame everything as, like, hey, like, those are, yeah, like, that's how it had to happen in history because it was necessary from retrospective. Like, God made everything work out, and, like, that's how it works out. and that's like subsumes everything to the theological and assumes the theological is the right frame and like the frame. Though of course there's, as we just pointed out, multiple theological frames one can use. So like even there you don't really get, you still have to clarify that. Or you could just say, hey, theology is one of many things that is influencing like the decisions that are being made. And it is not the ultimate frame under which like the president or the Secretary of State or like are making their decisions, or the various, you know, diplomatic parties or the military. Like it's an influence, but it's not necessarily the primary influence, depending on which administration and who and where. But like for the most part, I don't think we can argue that theology was the primary influence from the time that relations thawed between the state of Israel and America and today. There are certain periods where theology had more of a role and less of a role. That's, I'm not going to question that. It has, but it's, to me, it's like one of many influences, and it's not the primary frame. And if we only talk about this in terms of theology, I feel, well, one, then you have to actually sort out like all the different theologies and like have that argument first and like kind of get your room in order in that sense, which I feel like kind of misses the point. And, you know, we can be here and listen to you, you know, lecture about the importance of Torah Mitzion for probably hours, but I think it also kind of misses the point of like actual practical change, like behavioral change. Like you're not like, and that doesn't change by like lecturing about theology necessarily, though we like it happens in dialogue around like what are the things that matter to me and matter to you, and like is there a place of overlap, alignment, whether it's like out of practical utility or whether it's actually like real full value alignment. And like a lot of politics is just practical utility alliances, and we understand that. Like that's just like, and Peterson is sort of the king of pragmatism in many ways. Right, like you can talk about him in this theological mode of Israel, but like a lot of his stuff is really just kind of coming out of this pragmatic school of the Bible is useful insofar as it helps you in these psychological ways, and like we can bring it in and reframe it and use it this, and it's a very kind of utilitarian pragmatic. Now, it's interesting because there is this almost like weird idealism, I'd say, like there are times when he goes into a more idealistic framework and less pragmatic. And one of those is around Israel. There are a couple other times for sure. That's not the only thing. To Mark's, I know you don't, I'm not even looking at the comments, but the one comment I saw you had thrown up from Mark earlier was about like, how would you measure it? So Mark, my measure generally, and it's not a good measure. It's not a valid measure. Like you can talk about validated measures at some point, but like how many days can the BOM politics dumpster fire channel go without mentioning anti-Semitism? To me, that is like a super, super basic like heuristic of like how central or important is this in like the salient landscape at the moment. And on top of that, doesn't mean that anti-Semitism is happening, right? Like it just means that like this is just the conversation that's happening. Usually in those conversations, like you might get a variety of opinions, and like I'm not like assessing or measuring like, you know, how many people are coming out on one side versus another on any given issue in that chat. But I do think it's a super basic, you know, estimate of just like salience and what goes on.
What do you think about this comment?
I don't understand this
I don't
comment.
think it's wrong about it. No.
No.
Yeah.
Sorry. We has started among themselves with the fact of Jews being shot to death in Australia. That is and Mark has joined us well after that fact has been mentioned. So it's not about internal arguments within the TLC. It's not about us being called names or us calling names somebody else. It's about people getting shot. This is my reply to Mark.
Yosef, I'm just thinking about again what you were saying. But what if the theological stance is the pragmatic one, and by that I mean, if I'm being called out for being like, again, like when I mentioned, like let's say a Nick Fuentes, or what could be bubbling up to push people to be doing things like what we had in Australia, even though that's probably like a more of a radical Islamist background. Nevertheless, the story that is being promulgated is the Jews want to take over the world. Why? Because not because that's what many times what their religion pushes to, or that's what they believe that they need to do, or that's what they're looking to do. Now, I could give a response of like why Begin or why like those deals happened, but like you're right, you're answering from a political point of view and explaining how like the birds program that are that's in Israel is you need to get that.
After
You're on mute.
I respond. Oh,
Oh no, you're good. You're good.
yeah. Sorry.
I
I was getting a
also,
call.
I also want, I want to take the opportunity also to answer another question for Mark. If we are so much, if we cannot agree among ourselves, why do we care for each other? Or is there a contradiction with us caring for each other on the one hand and not being able to agree on anything on the other hand? Yes, this is the state of affairs. Chezi and Yaakov do care a lot about each other and they cannot agree. That is the state of affair, and it's not a logical contradiction. It's a effect of human beings are somewhat always inconsistent.
Right, but Yov, I would say that is something that bothers Nick Fuentes, for example. He's like, these people that don't agree fundamentally still are loyal to each other. They still love each other, though. That's what I see. And that's true if they're in France, and that's true if they're in England, and that's true if they're in America. And that kind of bond, which we want to bless the nations of the world through, is being turned into there's something evil that they're trying to do, that they're conspiring together. They're like that they're different, and that their loyalties are different, and that is the argument. You can't trust what they're saying. You can like so. Yosef, is it making sense? I'm not trying to subsume it all by theology, but I also think maybe the response is to actually step into the light and say, no, this is who we are. Now you can be like, well, what does that mean? Who are we? Like, there's still a disagreement over there. But
sorry, there's been a lot of things put on the table. First,
Sure.
I want to respond to the first thing. You took it off the screen. Mark had a comment. Gosh. What was the one you had earlier up?
About like we're crying?
Oh, yeah, that one. So, Mark, yeah. So I've been an active participant in dialogue, and not just like conversation back and forth, like warring, like, offense, defense, but like actual dialogue in the Politics Dumpster Fire, believe it or not, on these issues for quite some time now. I'm not there in every single time, but like, if I'm around and I have time and like I see someone who I think I can engage with in good faith, which is most of the people in that space, I do it. And like we have real and meaningful, productive conversations. At the same time, and I think that's probably the more important work. Like honestly, at some level. At the same time, I also think in those conversations, a lot of what comes up is like, well, okay, but you're just one Jew. Like, show me that this isn't just like a single, just you, right? Like, so show me this generalizes somewhat. Now, obviously, like this group of four is not like a huge collective random sample of Jews around the world, but like part of it, and part of the reason like Jacob's not here right now, but last night especially, like he wanted all four of us in this conversation because he wanted both Zionist and non-Zionist, American and Israeli, and secular and religious voices all in the conversation. He didn't want just one because he felt like it was important to show that there was kind of both a variety of opinion and also collective kind of convergence around certain parts of this. That's one. Two, to Yoav's addressing of Mark's other comment, and Chezi's. I think that there's something like I just brought home from Hanukkah. Yeshiva University put out an entire magazine on religious thought. It's like 50 some pages on the issue of these and these are the words of the living God. So this is this idea in Judaism that you can have arguments for the sake of heaven, and both sides can actually have like real legitimate and even like divinely endorsed points, even if only one practically can be the one that is the way the community like rules for like this is how we're going to practice or this is how we're going to hold and understand something. And
A second, there is a Yuda Israel that asks us for a link to John. I think we owe him an answer. Either we give him the link or we say, well, we don't.
I see.
someone we know.
Yeah, this is someone that is on with Jacob sometimes, so I know who it is. So, Yehuda, I will send a link in 10 minutes. I want to just hear out, like, just this is something that we were like sort of teasing out, and then I could add a link. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. Thanks. So I think there is this model of like, yeah, like we're going to we can have very, very rigorous and heated and passionate debates, and at the end of the day we still consider each other like family essentially, and you don't end a family because you fight with your brother or your sister or your mom or your dad, or you shouldn't. I mean, we could talk about modernity and kind of new takes on this, but like the ideal is that no, like you do not organize around ideas and confessions and dogmas, but that we're a family. And this is a very different model. I understand it's a different model in Christianity, in a fundamental way, to some extent. I mean, I do think there are versions within Christianity of this model too, and that have this plurality and like allow for quite a bit of dissension. We can talk about that, but like I think especially in the like Fuentes kind of reducto world of like, I want people to organize around the most basic, like kind of black and white ideas, and like not have that nuance. And like I need to know who my enemies are and my friends. And like it's gonna be very clear. My allies, my enemies. It's just again like what I was talking about last night with zero sum. Like that sort of model doesn't really allow for cooperation between like really different opposing points of view, and I would say it doesn't really allow for family, because it puts ideas above family. It's, and that's to me like just, I mean, talk about theology like that. There's the theology for me. There's the really big like potential disagreement, I think, on like a core issue, much more core than some of these other things I think that are downstream of it. So, okay, that addressed a whole bunch of things you guys put on the table. Going back to so going back to the theology thing you wanted to tease out.
Well, just that could be the pragmatic response. Like the pragmatic response is to say who we are.
Yeah. Oh, right. Okay, good. So this brings me full circle. Excellent. So maybe. And I think to Mark's point, this isn't about crying and like whatever, not taking your hits. Of course we take hits. Take hits all the time. Like, or shots, as Yoav's point. Like, and this isn't, we have been doing the dialogue with Christians and things. I think it was a long time that, I mean, and it's not that we haven't had conversations, like Chazi and I haven't talked, or Jacob and I haven't talked about some of this stuff kind of, on our own privately. We thought there'd be value though in a stream where the internal conversation is exposed to some degree, both because transparency helps kind of build trust at some level, but also to kind of bring in a lot more of the nuance and the sense of not get your room clean exactly, but just like that this conversation has to be happening both internally and externally, right? It cannot only be happening between me and non-Jews, even though that is important, hugely important point. I also have to be engaging this internally with my friends. And my friends and, people I consider brothers or whatever, family in some like, larger sense, that, yeah, and I know we may not agree on things, but I think it's if we need to have these conversations, and it's good, I think, to some degree for the external world to see us having these conversations, to see, because this is, and we can talk about that, maybe not, maybe like all, introspection, self-reflection should be private, and like you can go to a very maybe you shouldn't be praying on the street corner and saying you're fasting, type, maybe, but I don't think it's right. Like, this isn't to show off and say like, whatever. This is like, hey, we are trying to take, and not only are we trying to do an internal inventory here, but we're allowing comments. So like maybe our internal inventory is not sufficient. Maybe we're missing things that we're not seeing in our own conversation here, blind spots. So the comment section actually can help. Maybe I should have my comment section turned on. I just hate having it on my phone on StreamYard because I can't see anything.
Right.
But like having that in here is useful because it pushes us to engage, and not just get stuck kind of in a spiral or a parasitic kind of narrowing. Because that, I certainly fall into that. Like, I'll be the first, to say, like, I can stand up here and talk for hours and like forget where I am and go down who knows what rabbit hole.
Yoav, some thoughts?
No, nothing to add.
Well, I would say, I think in some sense, hello, Rabbi Malot, in some sense, that's also what's happening in Israel. You said this conversation needs to be both internal and external. And I think Israel, I was going to say, like, literally, the minister of Hasbara quit, like October 8th or something. I'm saying, so like, she was out. So the external conversation was basically, we're going on like Spartan mode, so to speak, right? It's just us. And then internally, even before October 7th, obviously there's a very robust conversation going on right now, Yosef, as you know, who we are, what are we supposed to be, what are we doing? And of course, it relates to the religious, the ultra-Orthodox, the secular. That whole conversation is happening as well. And again, I think that tension, while there's many states in the world that are going through their own meaning crisis, it becomes like palpable when you see like this story again, these people that are, televised for the last 2 years doing their thing. And we don't need to go down the list again of like why we know it's not a genocide and why we know all those data. And again, this is being said by Yosef. You and I both have had discussions about the use of AI and how that was being done and our own questions and challenges to this war, right? So coming from a space where we're challenging these things ourselves, and even what's going on in the government and the news in Israel and how the government gets challenged. Nevertheless, it's not when we say also we need to be pragmatic, right? Is it going to be the 20-minute video that we do debunking the 17 points and like, that was it. Now they know. Now we showed them. It's not an equation. I think it's larger than that. It's like a stance. The bigger question, I think, is there's one big question mark, which is like, who are you people? And maybe I'm wrong about the way I'm framing it, but like the way to go about responding to this, to Benjamin Boyce, right? Jacob was saying like he knows Brett Weinstein, and he knows him. Why is he not talking to him? Why is he not this? Like, right? So why? Why isn't everyone Paul Vanderklay? Why are they all not thinking and looking and reaching out and talking to people and being more open to having these discussions? Nevertheless, you see the response by these people is completely misunderstanding who the Jew is, what the Jew wants. And I don't know if it's again a 30-minute video of why the U.S. liberty is wrong.
So
it's a complicated story, by the way, the liberty, but
I think there's like two parts to what you just said. Because one is like, as I said before, like I think on the external conversations where I've seen the most kind of growth, change, benefit, alignment, dialogue is in one-on-one. And it's not scalable. It's like we can call it personalism if Luke was here, whatever, but it's not a scalable model. And like that has pros and cons, honestly, because maybe it's a real more meaningful growth and less surface, and like it builds real relationships, but it also like has much more limited impact. And that 30-minute video on the 17 points debunking or USS Liberty, like in theory should have more scale, but like getting it to actually hit right at the right moment, where it convinces people and is persuasive, like that is like some secret magic formula that I'm totally the wrong person to ask, because I have like a non-channel basically. Right. So I think those are two different very different conversations on like scale and like how you move the needle. What was the sorry, yeah, go ahead.
But Yosef, this also, so forget reaching the outer world, right?
Yeah.
What about
Israel? Yeah. So I mean, this is also, I think, hard because most people here are not following all the craziness politics in Israel, and they followed the war like in a very kind of limited way, as when it came up in like as a series of very curated clips of events that were meant to kind of evoke emotions on one side or the other. But they weren't really, for the most part, following the war in detail, and they certainly aren't following the current scandals in the government, with everything else going on, the Attorney General and the Supreme Court and everything. Like, to me, that's almost irrelevant to this. Like, as I said last night too, like it's just not where this conversation is if we're talking about like anti-Semitism, and especially like America or online American kind of stuff. Like, just not. But at the same time, like I think it's important for you guys to be here and contributing into this, for lots of reasons. I mean, and it's Mark's though. Okay, the Mark's thing's about convenient earlier. Right, that was the comment.
But Yosef, let's look at it like this.
Sorry, one second. I had one other thing I want to say. Something I brought up with Christian, right, was that it doesn't necessarily matter how Jews try to define themselves, because at least for thousands of years, Christians have had an imagination of the Jew, and that has substituted or overridden or been kind of that's what the Jew is, and anything else has to be fit into that pattern. So if any time you see a Jew, if you do encounter one, it has to fit this theological pattern that's in this text, as the church has passed it down, or my tradition, or my denomination, whatever. And that they were able to do this without even ever having met a Jew in many cases, right? Like it was we were not in control of this. It was beyond anything. Like I can't imagine 1,000 years ago, like a version of this conversation where 3 Jews are sitting around the table in like Spain, and in the 1025, and saying like, oh, like what are we gonna do about anti-Semitism? Like they don't really understand what Jews are. Like we have these interactions with our individual neighbors, but there's no way to like really convince them all. Like can I publish a manuscript? This is like such a crazy idea. Like it should be a crazy idea, right? And in some ways, we're still doing that. Like it's still a crazy thing to think that like somehow the 3 of us are going to actually move the needle on anything. However, at least at a global scale. However, like in these people's small towns where they were like active members of society and like actually doing things, often there was kind of a dissonance where like the Christian would in fact have a Jewish friend, but also have these like theological beliefs that were kind of like held in a separate, compartmentalized in their mind. And it was like, okay, and they could hold those two like models together because like they did in fact eventually, and it depends when, it depends like what prejudices were happening. But like we know that there were in fact times of good relations. I picked Spain because that was like the Golden Age period. And like, that was a good example of this. so there were times when like a localist kind of personalist thing did work at a very limited level in some sense, but it's the golden age of Spain. It's not the golden age of Toledo or the golden age of this neighborhood in Toledo. Like the fact is that Spain overall, and now I'm speaking here of Muslim Spain, right, mostly, but Muslim Spain overall, with Christians and Jews as dhimmis under the leaders for a couple centuries, 3.5 centuries or so, really were able to do this in many, many, many centers that were like connected to each other, but like it did in fact scale, just not like in a way that, not the ways that we usually think about scale. But like it really was a golden age of Spain. Like it was across the major cities and these little rural hamlets and like everything in between. And like that is not to be forgotten, I think. I think that's like a really interesting model. And like what allowed that to happen, like that would be a great thing to like dig into, honestly.
Well, so I have this comment on right here, right? International Criminal Court, ICC investigation said international crimes. Now I ask you a question in our little community over here right now. 6 years, I don't know, 3 years, a year, you always hear Jacob here, right? So you build this certain sort of, you hope some sort of credibility, right? So what does it mean when 3 of us say like, yeah, that's not true though, but like, I don't trust you. Like I could talk to you about 101 different things about, show me this article about your dissertation or that or this, like going through this whole convincing situation, like, on the Discord, right? Like where is the relationship again? This is happening in a small a community, right? Where you think like I went there in person, I saw the people, I ate at their house, yet when it comes to this topic, right? Like, no, you're wrong.
So one, there's
because just to say, forget, like you just said, moving the needle in the world, moving the needle in here, in this world.
Sorry, I want to relate to Sandy Basie. She's been writing a lot. It seems that she's asking for advice about how she should conduct herself in this situation. And I need to reply and say, I don't have any expectation from you. And I'm not your priest and I'm not your rabbi. And just go on with your life.
But I mean, check this out, right? There's the term woke is a deflection tactic to avoid addressing real issues that need to be addressed. Let's say I told this person right now, list out the things. I'm not.
You keep bringing new things in.
You're right. No, but it's related, because my point is, even if I address the 5 things this person wants to address, would he then be like, oh, now I got it. Now, great. No.
It depends. I think it depends. So I want to go back to your first question, and then we'll come back to this. I wrote it down. So on the first one, right, so I think there's kind of this, we understand that we can't all know everything about everything, and we have to kind of rely on some sort of communal cognition, I can't remember what the phrase is, but whatever the phrase that Jacob uses or PBK uses. But we need other people, we have to rely on them at some level. Yeah. At the same time, there is this like expertise fallacy, which is like someone who has expertise in one thing, like we assume that means they have like expertise in related things, but like we actually know that's not super true. I mean, it depends on what, but expertise doesn't generalize really well. It's really good at a very narrow, strong focus. And I think it's sometimes good to not fall into the expertise fallacy and say, okay, well, you might be an expert at XYZ, but you're not an expert on this. That is a fair point. And I can also understand where one might think, well, now we're talking about something that's like very personal to you in a different sort of way. So anti-Semitism, like maybe you're going to be more biased about. And that's kind of funny because like I'm pretty sure, if you talk about anything Jewish with me, I'm going to be pretty biased about that in general. I don't think anti-Semitism is unique. And it's also part of this other fallacy of like somehow I'm more objective about other things. Like there's sort of this view from nowhere, sort of like expertise, another type of expertise fallacy, right? That the expert, it can be more objective. So like I think there's like a couple of different things playing there. On like the kind of emotional level, it's frustrating, of course. Like there's no question that like if someone seems to be your friend and trusts you and does all these things, you know, and you have good conversations and like you think that you have a real relationship, but then they're like, oh, but and he's, you know, Jews are actually trying to destroy the world, and like then there's like that should be really a that's going to call to like a lot of questions to mind. I mean, I understand like, you know, you could cry about it, like there's a pain there. I mean, we could acknowledge that pain, or a betrayal almost, right? But at the same time, there's also like there's clearly a failure in communication, like of like the basis of the friendship or values, where like you still think I'm somehow trying to undermine society, and you want me to be your friend. Now, it is kind of interesting because there are certainly people in BOM who are like non-Jews who are like, well, I don't like what's America anymore? Like, I don't feel loyal to this. It's like this crazy, you know, set of ideas that doesn't hold together. And like, why should I be loyal so much? Why should I demand loyalty of others? Right? That's a very different kind of person and place to have this conversation than someone who is like really like interrogating the dual loyalty question and cares about it as like, you know, that is something important to them. But I'll say, I won't say who, but I mean, someone who was a friend of mine, and he's still my friend, you know, like said, like I asked him when Jacob first said maybe we should have these Jewish streams, a couple days ago, like I asked him like, what questions would you have? Like, what would you want us to address? And I asked him in the politics channel, so he could be free to kind of, you know, go wherever. And it was interesting because he formulated 3 questions. They were all for Ben Shapiro, at kind of as to the TPUSA like aftermath. And then we actually had a conversation about those 3 questions, and I think like we left it, I don't think like everything was solved and like whatever, but like I think it was like a good challenging like dialogue where like I pushed him, he pushed me, and there was something there, and there was a deepening of the relationship specifically on the point and premise of like this is an area that clearly like we haven't developed or discussed enough. And I think that's, you know, and so I think there are times when if you like, you know, the guy on the internet making the BuzzFeed equivalent of like 4chan, like, you know, 17 takedowns of the Talmud or whatever, like that is not going to be productive, like taking down each of those points. If you already have a relationship and like the person's actually thoughtful about, hey, these are the questions, like the real questions I have, and then you can actually talk about those questions. I think, there's chance.
But when you see Benjamin Boyce, right? I mean, that's part of Jacob's contention. Like he is supposed to be thoughtful, right? He took the time to like, you know, think and do and what. I know you were saying he also doesn't want to take down, you know, the whole economic structure because he understands that that's not going to work well. Yet he still potentially has issues, right, with these. And then you're like, okay, so wait, why you're also being hoodwinked? Everyone's being hoodwinked?
So I don't know Boyce super well. I haven't seen, like, Jacob isn't here, and I don't feel fair. Like, I've only really seen his 2 videos with Christian Baxter, and I think maybe 10 minutes of a different video someone sent me once ages ago. So I don't really know. I could tell you from the Christian Baxter video, like, I was very frustrated. I think I said this in that video, that he talks around things, and he doesn't, like, for someone who wants, like, transparency and, like, directness of, like, those who he's opposing, like, he doesn't say anything directly. And
he's just asking questions.
It just annoyed me. No, it's not even just asking questions. No, he uses all these euphemisms. He like prevaricates, and he does like all these kind of rhetorical tricks, like not say the thing, and just point to the thing. And even though like he could have easily said the thing, like in that conversation, like I don't think he was in an unsafe space or unbrave space, like with Christian. And it's not like he doesn't, like, I don't say that occasionally in other places. It was just weird. It was like a lot of self-censoring or something that just maybe it's not neither here or there, maybe it's just my personal preference, but I found it kind of.
Just a second. I want to answer Mark. We owe it to him because we have started a conversation some time ago. Mark is coming in the middle. He doesn't understand what we're talking about. So there is this Boyce character, and what he started to promote is that Darwinism necessarily leads to genocide. And in this particular case, he was talking about the Jews. He says, okay, the Jews are a different race and they want to propagate their genes over the genes of others. So that leads from them trying to limit the competing gene pools like that of the American Christians and such. What is bothering me about it is this is the classical left point anti-science, anti-Darwinism standpoint. Darwinism, people have already said that Darwinism will necessarily lead to Nazism, and therefore you should stop believing in Darwinism. Unfortunately, Darwinism is true. Darwinism works. So I suggest that you, Mark,
sort of
content with that point generally. What do you think about Darwinism, and how is this world working in the face of the fact that Darwinism works? And leave the Jewish question aside when you consider that.
I think Mark probably should just watch last night's stream because we went through a very kind of comparing Darwin's Cathedral by Wilson and its theory of which both addresses kind of cooperation and competition with this book that Boyce has been asking about, quoting, talking about more recently, called Culture of Critique by McDonald's. I don't remember his first name. That is not just about Darwinism, but a very, very specific kind of pseudoscientific Darwinism where Jews are kind of a parasite on the host that's trying to kill the host, and it's entirely zero sum. And this has at least been the case since like the early 20th century, late 19th century. So that's his contention.
So I want to stress it for Mark. Leave the Jews aside. Can you live as a good person with Darwinism? That is the issue for you.
Right. But I would say there's a difference in real Darwinism and this fake one. And like that's also
yes, I know, but I want Mark to make his mind about this question, regardless of any Zionists.
Boyce is not exploring ideas. That's the problem, Mark. And so this was part of it, is that he decided to ask Darryl Cooper about this book, and not someone who actually either knows science or someone like who knows the kind of Jewish history. And it's a very, very heavily cherry-picked book. He has zero examples of any Jewish conservatives, of any religious Jews, like except for when he talks about Ashkenazi IQ in like the Middle Ages. That's like the only time he addresses like religious Jews. It's a very, very kind of, you would be upset by this book, I think, just from like the quality of method, knowing you and like how your methodologies work. But like he's accepting this book. He's like, this book is like amazing and it's giving me nightmares and I want to like, talk about it. And the one person he consulted on it is like a very weird choice for someone to like validate from my perspective, from our perspective. I don't know. I mean, I'll speak for myself. And I mean, Jacob said the same last night. So Jacob's perspective. He is exploring ideas. And I mean, I don't know if you saw my conversation with Chris, but I don't want to just focus. Mark's great. We owe him things. He's part of this conversation, dialogue. I don't think he should necessarily dominate this. We did say we're going to invite Yehuda Israel on.
Yeah, I don't know if he's even here anymore. He might have left. I could put the link.
Send him the link though, please, so that we don't forget. Like that was like supposed to be 10 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago already. If he's here.
I would ask also, Yosef, and this is still related, which is earlier on we spoke about also what's the right move, right? Is to come out and condemn the Nick Fuentes and the Groypers, or allow them. And this is what Boyce was sort of saying. I'm just trying to reach these people. I'm trying to talk to these people. I'm trying to be able to understand where these people are coming from, right? They're lost. What America and what the culture did to these white boys, we have to be able to help them. And calling them anti-Semites or saying they don't understand, right? That's not going to work. We have to be able to.
Yeah. Again, Mark, you're getting everything wrong. We are not against. We are not. It's not a free speech issue. We are not against anybody saying the follies out loud. But we can be upset about it. There's absolutely nothing wrong in being upset about people being bad people. So I am upset, but I support his, as anybody else, to go on and scream his follies.
Yeah. This isn't a free speech issue, and I even said to Christian about Fuentes, I have very mixed feelings, because I think that there are people further to the right of him, and if he wasn't there, or if he, as he seems to be becoming slightly more mainstream, and moderating his view a little bit to kind of accommodate or align somewhat to the mainstream, though still not a lot, but a little bit. Even that little bit generated a backlash in his own audience about who got to you. And there's dangers in taking him out of the information chain, because then you can maybe the majority of his audience comes slightly less black-pilled. That could be good for various reasons, but a minority won't, and it'll become more extreme. And there's a real danger there, and I don't know where the practical balance is necessarily on that. And with Boyce, I think there are people.
A second, Mark. As much as I know you, I expect you to come up with a video explaining why Darwinism does not lead to genocide.
There are probably people.
Okay, Mark. So you have homework to do. Now, putting that aside, go on, Yosef.
There are probably people that Boyce can talk to that I cannot. Absolutely. I don't know that he's necessarily the best person to talk to those people. I think that's its own question, and whether by talking to them, their influence on him will necessarily be good, right? I think there's a mutuality there, where he's clearly in order to understand their world, immersing himself more in it, and he is changing. And I don't think that again, I don't watch enough of him, but at least that is what Jacob has told me, and I'm kind of relying on his cognition here. But I can acknowledge that, and if someone wants to correct me, it does seem Boyce as going down this path, in exploring it and asking these questions, isn't just asking questions. I think that's disingenuous. He really is taking on real positions, and this came up in his conversation with Christian Baxter, and my conversation with Christian Baxter, that was a response to that, Mark. So if you need other homework, if you haven't seen them, that if someone uses, I don't know, something National Socialist as their kind of I'm going to joke about this, I'm going to joke about ovens, whatever it is, as kind of my test of who's in and who's out, that may really mean that both I cannot necessarily have a productive dialogue with them, because they're going to filter me out automatically before we can even establish a relationship. Or it could just mean depending on which of us, which Jew they're responding to or interacting with, they may not be the right person, right? They could just, have too strong of an emotional reaction, not be in the right place for that type of conversation with that kind of the test. And that's fair. And that means that you need someone else, maybe not Jewish, maybe Jewish, but with a different level of sensitivity, or a different relationship to that person, to have that conversation. But I think my bigger point was what Boyce was seeming to say to Christian is, it's more important for me to include these alienated young men in my conversation, in my cognition, for two reasons. One, because I think they're like the future, and this is where all the creativity in the world is coming from. He has a very kind of strong romantic like era belief in the creativity of youth. He's like, it's just kind of interesting, and like, you know, that's where progress is going to be. Like, really, capital P progress for him is coming from this group of young men, and he really feels like that is why they need to be part of the conversation. And the second thing is, he seems to say, I'm willing to do that at the expense of sacrificing Jews in the conversation. And that is kind of where we get into this whole question of like, are Jews, should they be part of this conversation? Are we part of the conversation of America? Like, are American Jews like really part of this society? Are we going to accept their influence? Are we going to accept that they vote, and they vote like, you know, based on their values and their religion? And sometimes that does mean, you know, their theologies that include Zionism. And like, is that valid or not? Like, are they just as equal citizens as someone who's here and I don't know, like a Catholic who's voting with Catholic, you know, morals in mind, or
Well,
even a Mexican American who's a full citizen, but like doesn't want Mexico and America to go to war. Like,
Joseph, how does that not then eventually translate into a religious frame? Because
I don't think it's only religious. I mean, I gave ethnic examples, but
yeah, but I don't understand how, okay, when the issue comes to Israel, which is the issue we're discussing right now, and when the issue comes again, not like I was saying to Jews, but specifically to the land, like when you talk about Zionism right now as an issue, and America's relationship with Israel, the second you say that name, all that baggage is with it, right? Which is like, even this person that is again against you know, could be quote unquote very left, and this is what a lot of, let's say, American Democrats sort of felt also, in a certain sense, like abandoned by their allies on the left in a certain sense, because, you know, that doesn't matter that you're sort of towing the line on all the other things you need to toe the line on, right? Mm-hmm. Immediately they weren't seen at all for any other you know, attributes, who they are, what they're for. They're immediately just seen as Jew, which means you're loyal to this place. And in fact, they were loyal to that place, right? They're like, we're not going to turn our back on Israel, the majority. And everyone was like, oh, look, you're not turning your back on Israel. And like, that is the reality you're seeing. Like, when someone comes and says like Israel first, but you can't deny because America first, because that is the litmus test. Because you are making me choose. And this also relates to like what the story is. What's the story of America? I would argue the story of America, it's the founding fathers, is a religious story. And when whether it's Doug Wilson or Nick Fuentes, and obviously very, very different people, right? They're all going to have to need to, and he does these qualifiers, right? About, you know, positioning himself in that video that you sent about like, you know, I'm a supersessionist, but not this one, I'm that one. But he needs to qualify that because that is at the core. Right? And he says you got to be brave about who we're talking about, who these people are, what they believe in, what they don't believe in. And Nick Fuentes comes and says, this is Jesus' country, right? So when he says it, he's like, well, is there a place for Jews there? If you're calling it Jesus' country and it's there to represent that idea, then you're going to have a problem. I feel like I
still want to push back because, like,
please,
right? Like, yes, there were parts of the founding that were certainly religiously motivated, especially out of the Puritan kind of New England strain of thought. But most of the founders were not, right? Most of them were deists. Most of them, like, yes, like, and we can talk about moralistic, therapeutic deism or whatever. Like, we can talk about that, but like, that's not like Wilson has appropriated what he's appropriated for his own purposes, and it's not the founding fathers' myth. Like, I mean, it's not what they believed. He has appropriated their myths for his own purposes in a completely new direction, I would say. Sometimes trying to draw from kind of older thought, but also kind of doing his own thing. Fuentes' version of that is very different, even though on the surface it sort of is the same, because he wants a Catholic theocracy, right? That's just like, whereas Wilson wants a Nicene Protestant, I don't even know, not a theocracy. Well, something like a theocracy, but I don't know if he calls it that. I can't remember now.
In none of them do Jews take up this much of attention.
In none of which?
In both of those scenarios, the Jews do not take up so much attention.
Jews wouldn't be allowed to hold public office in either of those. I don't even know that they would allow us to serve in the military. It would be a return probably to something of like a early 19th century Jewish emancipation model.
So what is it for people to see suddenly? No one has seen a war in the longest time. And suddenly you see like this scale of war with this level of capabilities, the beepers, all that stuff. And at the same time, the same crazy country that's doing this thing we're seeing right now, which is nuts on many levels, both impressive and horrifying for many people, and also just horrifying because it's war, obviously. And at the same time, they're also super, these same people connected to this land that's doing this, justifying it because it's their place, apparently. They also have super strong ties in America, and then super other influences in many other places in the world. Like, how would that not bother someone? Especially, like, it's an affront. Like, if you're saying, if I want to have Jacob, I'm adding you and you're removing yourself. So, okay, there you go.
I mean, I feel like Jacob would probably mention Ukraine at this point, which would probably be.
Just a second. What about a friend who wanted to join the conversation some 2 hours ago?
Yehuda Israel has admin privileges. He could have just come on by himself.
I want to actually go though, so. Okay. But I'll let Jacob replace me. I'm sure he'll say everything I was going to say.
All of it, yes.
All of it, every word.
Before you go, just one thing.
Sure.
You see this? This is my dissertation. It took 5 years to make.
Yeah.
Yalla, let's go.
Beautiful.
Wrap that up.
Yeah. Someday I hope to show you mine on screen too.
Yosef, I'm glad we're concluding on an agreement. Thanks.
I want to keep the conversation, as focused as is possible to keep. And frankly, I don't know how adding voices like Mark's helps at all, because he likes to have strong opinions about things he knows nothing about. And which can be useful sometimes.
How to win friends?
Look, I don't like the fact that when we talk about anti-Semitism, Israel keeps on coming up, because I don't see what Israel has to do with the Jews.
I'm not, all jokes aside, like, you understand that position is a minority position, even if you agree with that's the right position.
Right.
No. I completely agree with Jacob. This is partly because I was rather silent during this conversation, only replying to comments. Anti-Semitism happened much before the state of Israel existed. That's your proof.
Right. So, like, whether I don't like it when people say anti-Semitism is because of the Zionists, because we've had anti-Semitism before there were Zionists. Zionism is a result of anti-Semitism. It's a very galut mentality to have. Yes, I'm joking. But if we're My problem is, as I said earlier to Neil, right? Look, there is what was the actual statement that we thought we could agree on? I thought we could agree on. There is a rise in anti-Semitism that here, this is what I wrote. There appears to be a rise in anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic criticism of Jews. We would like those who consider themselves our friends to recognize that this is different than what existed 2 years or 20 years ago. It's not different from what existed 70 years ago. We think it is an online phenomenon being amplified artificially. We would appreciate displays of solidarity from our friends, our real life friends, to show that this is not something that will be accepted in the real world. And I don't believe anti-Semitism has legs. I don't think it has legs. This is not something that's going to win the day. The question is, how much damage is it going to do before, and what is the reason people are amplifying it? I think China is amplifying it. I think Iran is amplifying it. I think Russia is amplifying it because, yes, it does weaken the United States to hate Israel. Israel is a very useful ally of the United States. And that is the extent of my Zionism.
Well, I alluded to this when we were talking earlier to Yosef, saying, that's like a separate conversation, which is like, how real is this movement? I would then argue, though, that let's say when I see like a Megyn Kelly, right, behaving the way she's behaving, or a Benjamin Boyce, and I know they're different, but like, why are they not?
Okay, Benjamin Boyce is a whole different thing from Megyn Kelly.
I understand.
Megyn Kelly has her finger out to see which way the wind is blowing, and she's going the same way. And a lot of people are, because they're seeing online what they imagine is a real movement, which I think is not as real as a lot of people think. Benjamin Boyce is a whole other thing. Like Benjamin Boyce, I almost feel a sort of betrayal because I was very supportive of him, and I would like to be supportive of him. It's just I don't have a personal relationship with him to say, hold on here, what is actually going on here with you, right? What are you actually saying? And I understand that he has questions, and I'm wondering why he feels that he can't have the discussions, right? I might be having a discussion with Gavin about this stuff because Gavin similarly has questions, but he's willing to actually talk to me about it.
Right. So, I mean, I know it's so, and I understand that the claim will be that I'm biased, but it's perplexing to me that there's so many questions.
It's yes, but look, when I went to college, it was understood as Jews that there were going to be tons of questions, and it is our job to answer questions. When I was in undergrad in college, it was understood that if you got somebody to read Mein Kampf, that was considered a win. And for some reason, and I think it's the woke, right? Which woke, right? Funny. That was not intentional, but it is funny. Neil, by the way, I am sending you a link if you want to join because I think you would be a good contributor.
I'm very privileged to be. I guess Yoav and I are both privileged growing up in Israel.
But look, yes, you were living in a Jewish culture mostly. But the Jews are a mysterious people that many people. We are characters in Christian. We are characters in the Christian Bible. I'll tell the story of my cousin again.
Before the story, though, what you just said right now, right? What you just said right now, I'm bringing back this note. I'm bringing this back. Okay. Mike, and you just saying we're a character in the Christian Bible. Again, the that's why it doesn't matter right now if Israel is the way I see it or the way you see it. It's how the world sees the Jew. And
No.
Okay.
The fact is, when people want to attack Jews, like Bondi Beach was not an Israeli event. It was a Chabad menorah lighting. When people think of Israelis, they think of Hasidic Jews, which is stolen valor.
But that's because Israel represents Jews to them.
No, it's because Israel dresses up itself in Jewish
One
garb
second, but Jacob,
in order to hide behind our
Jacob, I just was pointing out that it doesn't matter how you see it as them dressing up or I see it as trying to actually manifest. Either way, it's seen by the non-Jew as Jew.
See, this is the thing. They see Hasidic Jews and they imagine that Israelis who want nothing to do with parazitim, like Hasidic Jews, are somehow involved. When you see Israelis depicted in Israel, right? They're wearing Birkenstocks and not Hasidic garb. And when in the United States, when somebody wants to depict an Israeli, it's somebody who's wearing Hasidic garb.
But Jacob, most of the Jewish world, okay, have an affinity towards other Jews and specifically the Jews that are living in Israel as well. I'm putting aside the politics, which is more complicated. But that goes back to the Nixon thing, which is the person in Australia knows that this Jew over here, if I kill him, it is also hurting the Jew in Israel and in the Jew in Italy because they're all connected.
No. See, this is the thing. That person is wrong. The person who believes that if I
all connected,
you are making a religious point.
But that is what is palpable for people.
Not for a materialist.
Do you think the man standing on the bridge shooting people, he's just a materialist, or is he thinking there's a theological thing going on over here?
He's thinking that Jews and Israelis are the same, partially because Israelis go around insisting that we are, despite the fact we're not.
Yoav, you could weigh in if you'd like.
No, I don't, because I wanted two of you to stop. It's getting boring. And Jacob, I'm sorry. I insist that I'm a Jew. In as much as I don't qualify by any objective measure, I do insist.
You qualify halakhically. You are Jewish.
Fine. So I'm a Jew. What can I mean? I know it's frustrating for the real Jews. But anyway, I don't see how this argument between you is interesting to the world.
You're right. It's not, but that was.
And it's not interesting to me either. I wish we weren't having it.
But we're disagreeing then again on the point. It's not that, and that's what I'm trying to sidetrack it, which is it's not. But that's what we're disagreeing about, Yoav, and maybe you could weigh in. I'm saying it's not about how I see Israel or how Jacob sees Israel. I believe the other, our enemies, see this as.
Who cares? Who cares what they believe?
But I'm just saying, you want to try to figure out a response, and you're talking to people, and you're telling people what to think. right?
I'm not telling any. First of all, I'm not telling people what to think.
Not what
I-
to think. You're trying to explain your framing of a situation. Why you
I am trying to explain to people who aren't anti-Semites.
right?
So what do I care what the actual anti-Semites believe?
I know, but explaining but you are deciding right now that a method to explain to an anti-Semite, to a non-anti-Semite that's having questions, right? I'm going to start with decoupling Israel from Judaism. And I'm saying that might be a wrong move because most Jews are not doing that decoupling. So he's hearing that narrative from you about that decoupling, right? Is super important for him to better understand and have a relationship with Jews and not feel anti-Semitic. And I'm saying, no, that's not true. Like,
Okay, you're wrong. So
okay, so so Yoav, do you understand the disagreement over here, and do you feel like either we're not going down the right path, or do you want to shed some light on how we're explaining this, or how better to articulate this?
I want to cut the cake
Sure,
differently.
got it.
I see the two sides of the argument as being conservatism versus the Moderna, the progress. I think these are the two camps here, and try to understand. This not Jews against non-Jews, and it's not secular Jews against. Let's say in Israel. In Israel, you have the woke left, and you have the woke, and you have the alt-right. You have the people that want to build settlements in Gaza, a small minority as they are, and you have the people who want to make Judaism illegal in Tel Aviv, minority as they are. And I see the split that way. And the root of the problem that is concerning America at the moment is what used to be the silent majority of the white young male who were not treating right and now are coming into their own and are now returning to express themselves as a political power. That is the root of the issue that is concerning you, because the Islamist that is shooting people in Australia is not a matter of any contentions between any of us. The issue is in America. The issue is, where is the white young male? Where are they going? And there is a reaction against the oppressive regime of the woke left. And there were a lot of Jews in that regime of the oppressive woke left in America. And my message to them is, in as much as I'm also a white male, and I have 3 boys who are also definitely young male, possibly also white, that woke left is as much my enemy as it is yours. And yes, there are Jews on the opposing camp in America as there are in Israel. silence.
What do you think about that?
I mean,
Chris?
I agree with you 1,000,000%. I think you're framing it correctly, and I think that is the problem. The fact is that there were certainly way too many Jews who were involved with being woke. I think it's a mistake to say that all Jews were part of the woke. I think that the backlash against Jews instead of wokeism is a mistake. And Ben Shapiro has become the kind of avatar for this because he was one of the people who, and many Jews were at the forefront of the fight against woke. Yet people are now saying Ben Shapiro is Israel first, which frankly I don't think he is, even though he's far more Zionist than I am. And it is pure anti-Semitism. It has nothing to do with Zionism. The hatred of Ben Shapiro has to do with we don't like Jews.
But what is it about the Groypers? Why don't they like Jews though?
Okay, first of all, the group as large as the Groypers, part of the problem that Nick Fuentes himself has is he doesn't get to define who his audience is, right? He's lately, like, people have started saying, "Oh, who got to you?" Right? Because the people who thought he was saying certain things now realize he wasn't saying certain things. And even Daryl Cooper did the exact same thing, right? He's like, "Oh, well, yeah, I've been hanging around with all these people, but like some of them are even way too far for me," right? So like defining who the Groypers are is very difficult. And again, we go back to the problem of the amplification by Iran and and frankly, I have to say personally, I would not be surprised if there were elements in some Zionist organization which are in fact amplifying anti-Semitism, as the state of Israel has a history of actually having done. I don't know who's exactly amplifying Nick Fuentes. I know that it's not real. It's certainly not as big as people imagine that it is. And that's what I am having problems with.
I want to answer a comment about wars of brother against brother. And the example was given was the war in Ukraine. It's always brother against brother when you look at it from far, far away. Because for me, for example, I could not make any distinction between the Ukrainian language and the Russian language. And both sort of looks very Slavic to me. But since I know some of the history of the region, one starts to see some differences. In fact, Ukraine is very big, very wide country, and it has many different ethnicities. It has Romanians, it has Hungarians, it has people very close to Poland, and it has a lot of Russian, ethnically Russian people. The war in very bitter and disastrous war in Ukraine is a war between people of different ethnicities who just seem to be similar from far, far away. And I'm connecting this now to anti-Semitism, because one thing that was really bothering me when I was a bit younger is, why do everybody hate me? Because my family originally, some generations ago, came from that part of the world. And the Russians hated us, and the Ukrainians hated us, and the Romanian hated us, and the Hungarian hated us. And I have to ask, why does everybody hate me? And now there are no Jews in that part of the world. They will come occasionally once a year as tourists, but there are no Jews in this part of the world anymore. And now I began to see that actually, at least in this part of the world, everybody hates everybody. The Ukrainians hate the Russians, and the Russians hate the Ukraine, and the Hungarians would have liked to get back the territory that they've lost some times ago as well. So this is the way of the world. People that should have been brothers are splitting into ethnicities and are conducting wars. This is the nature of the human animal. Extremely unfortunate.
We speak about this amplification, Jacob, like as in, we shouldn't be too frightened from these numbers because they're fake. But then there's a question, once it gets to JD Vance, right, it starts getting a little bigger than that, right? A little, as far as which way is he gonna go, and and I don't know. You came out saying, like, why do you care? Like, sort of what they think. But I wonder if, and it could be, is Tucker Carlson? Has he just turned into an anti-Semite? Was he always an anti-Semite? Is it also just like you said, trying to see where the wind's blowing?
No. Tucker Carlson is a whole other thing. Tucker Carlson is deeply repentant of his role in the Iraq War and the U.S. involvement.
1 second. I want to stop 1 second. Mark,
please stop. No, please stop.
You're just watching a discussion.
Stop. Mark likes attention. He says anything necessary to get it. Just
we all do we all like attention. And I just want to insert to Sherry. Sorry if I meant to hint that you are naive. I was addressing your comments, and I was maybe talking to other people that will listen to this protest sometime, and they may be naive.
Okay, Jacob, you were going on. Tucker Carlson is something else.
Carlson is deeply repentant of the fact that he was involved in the push towards the United States spending a lot of money in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and he seriously does believe that we went to war in Iraq because Benjamin Netanyahu was pushing us. The narrative is factually wrong, but that's beside the point. I don't think he's actually anti-Semitic. I think what has happened is, like a lot of people who have lost their ability to trust people they used to listen to, he's looking for new people. And Daryl Cooper, like when I first listened to his Fear and Loathing in Jerusalem, right? it was obvious to me what was going on. The guy was presenting the same things that Pat Buchanan did, which are very hard for people to understand how they are anti-Semitic, and which have some important points, but ultimately are just plain wrong. And once you don't have trust and the secured distributed cognition, as I like to call it, where smart people can actually think through things, you're going to end up with bad ideas coming through. And that's what's going on.
including JD Vance.
JD Vance, I don't know exactly what's going on with him. I don't know what's exactly going on with Tucker Carlson either. But like Tucker Carlson, I can understand, and I've been following his career longer. I think JD Vance, first of all, I don't know how he feels. I am sure he does not like Nick Fuentes calling his wife a Jeet, right? Yet he, for some reason, like, he hasn't said anything about that, which makes me wonder what's going on here. And
Well,
yes,
it's-
Nick Fuentes might be, and Tucker Carlson might both be under the influence of the CIA.
But
Jacob, just came to my attention something that I should have noticed years ago. The role that Qatar is playing in the Middle East, because you keep glorifying the Saudi Arabia as a player, and and Turkey, perhaps. Qatar is the counterweight. Saudi Arabia would have been much more of a big influence in the region, if not in Qatar. And it's hard to see at first how a small state is so much influences in the grand scheme of things. But it goes to the beginning of Islam. It goes to the first days of Islam that play between those two camps.
Yeah, I don't understand what's going on in Qatar at all. Like, I don't understand how Qatar has become such a big player in so many things. They, from what I have seen, they don't have the oil fields, they don't have the money, they don't have how Qatar has become such a huge player.
They have gas, and they have the money, and they have influence for 2,000 years on certain tribes in Saudi Arabia.
Interesting.
do you? So Jacob, you read out the statement that you wanted to say. This you wanted to have a similar statement maybe like a year and a half ago about, you came out about one specific individual, the name doesn't matter right now, about some tweets that they were sending, and you then said, hey, this is anti-Semitic. I was hoping to see more pushback on this from the community. Now, and you're saying the same thing now.
I think this is very different, but yes.
Why do you feel you're not seeing the response you want to be seeing?
My hope is that if it's just Jacob, the one person, first of all, I mean, I had hoped that especially people who considered themselves personalists, right, would take me seriously, but apparently they don't. Whatever. Okay. I mean, Yoav is right. I've been screaming about the holy martyr Michael Servetus for years now, and I don't see any icons of him up at Calvin University yet. Od lo avde tikvatenu, but We try, but I think that this situation, right? Look, Bondi Beach.
Wait, but what?
Hanukkah. Like, what are we expecting for Passover?
What are you, Jacob? What is that? What do you feel? Trying to have a cold analysis, being in the space for so long. Why do you think the response you're seeing is what you're seeing?
I think
for example,
I think a lot of people just don't take the idea of anti-Semitism seriously. They really don't.
If there was, I know this was something that you were asking for, but if there was some sort of structure or authority or hierarchy in the TLC, would you have wanted to see Paul Vanderklay come up and say, like, I want to have a discussion about this? There should be like a topic about this.
This is part of the reason I was so upset when I listened to Cale Zeldin and Grim Grizz. They had a discussion, and the discussion was, what are we even talking about? Rod Dreher is losing his mind, and it's like, hold on, Rod Dreher. We just had a conference with Rod Dreher. Nobody's paying attention to Rod Dreher ringing the alarm bells. And if I mean, this is part of my thing with TLC. There's a reason I don't talk about this corner and I don't talk about TLC.
Because
there's no community here.
Right. So just wait here. Wait out. What you're saying is, if TLC was real, right, or was or was real enough to function properly, right, that what should have happened right now is that if said people in the community are feeling attacked, or I don't want to say unsafe, but like are raising the alarm, so to speak, and these are, like we were saying, diverse voices as well, you would have expected to see positive feedback, how it rises to the top of people's salience. Paul Vanderklay starts talking about it, maybe even gets to, like, not that that's what you're looking for, but ideally, right, you're saying, hey, this is a big problem. Why am I even not reaching the quote unquote 33,000 subs that Paul has? And why is this not a conversation that's being elevated to? Why is he not talking about it with all the other quote unquote status people out there?
By the way, welcome, Neil. Put the link to your channel in the chat, because Neil has started a channel and he's doing just chatting streams and stuff. And I only found out about it recently.
Keep it low. Keep it secret.
Look, I expected when somebody like Rod Dreher, who is kind of part of this corner, right, starts talking about something seriously. I think Paul Vanderklay actually has been talking about it somewhat in a roundabout way, as much as he feels comfortable doing it. Again, keep on going back to that discussion between Grizz and Cale, where like they were throwing water on it. Oh, like Rod Dreher's lost his mind. No, Rod Dreher has not lost his mind. I think he's pointing to something very real.
To be fair, Paul Vanderklay reached out to you, me, Yosef, and asked for, more information, more things you could read up.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay.
Right. Yeah. So I'm just going to say, like, he was, quote unquote, doing his due diligence and doing his homework. And he wanted to hear from a diverse opinion. But Neil, first of all, anyone's wondering, it says Jews chatting and Neil's over here, but because of
Neil's an honorary Jew
in his fraternity. Exactly.
I'm about 20 years out of practice, so you guys will have to be.
Oh, hold on, you're ZBT.
Right? Yeah. But so but during my time in my fraternity, it was literally like 50-50 down the middle, Jew Gentile. Like it was almost precisely. Now most Jews were not Orthodox or not practicing, very nominal. But we did have Orthodox Jews, like and I we had a fraternity brother who he was arrested for possession across state lines in Virginia because, quote, the guy's shit looked good during college, and he had enough in his car that he got arrested on possession with intent to distribute. And this gentleman, very smart, like an extremely smart guy, was in prison for 10 months. And then when he got back out of prison, he was technically back in the fraternity because he was back in school. Now, when he went away is when I joined the fraternity. And then, and I remember he would toss bombs into the conversation. So we'd have these like bomb conversations in the living room with Jews and Gentiles alike. And yeah, it was both fun, but also like what the
So
tell us, Neil.
I was listening to a podcast yesterday by Eli Lake, Breaking History, where he's talking about Meyer Lansky and Jewish gangsters. And the one line that I took away from that is when they were fighting the Nazis in the streets of New York, the question was, where's the ZBTs? Because ZBT were the Jewish muscle going around beating up Nazis back then. Not that I in any way endorse Jewish militias, but Neil is the only one who's actually been a part of the Jewish militia in the United States.
It was originally founded as a Zionist organization in 1898. I don't know, and then it became associated with universities after that. And ZBT is only historically Jewish, whereas AEPI, I believe AEPI is still, at least when I was in school, that was officially the Jewish fraternity. But yeah, no, and I honestly, I don't have a lot of knowledge on the history of Zionism, generally speaking. But so I can give you, as like a lay American, and quite frankly, I don't pay that much attention to like the minutia of what's going on in Israel. And but like I think I have a good sense of American vibes, if that makes sense. And so if I am to put myself into the mind of the average American young man, and I do think this is more of a problem with men than it is women. I really do think that it's specifically young men, and I also think I think all of this is tied back to identity, like all of it. I think the rise of trans is tied to identity. It's all tied to like, who am I, and who am I outside of the edifice of like American colonialization and imperialism and all, and so people are looking for smaller and smaller identities. So then, or they're looking for an identity of like, this is a container of who I am and where I belong. And I don't think it's a coincidence that you have the rise of like the white male identity, or the rise of like, what does it mean to be English? What does it mean to be German? What does it mean to be French? And simultaneously this, I'll call it a rising resentment against Jews more generally and against the state of Israel specifically. Because I think there is this resentment of like, somehow as the world has kind of secularized and Europe has just become, all these places have become the same. All these peoples have become the same. But yet the Jewish people are still the Jewish people. You know what I mean? They're still, I thought about this in relation to Sam Tiedemann actually a lot, because it's interesting. Like you would think that like the bigger threat to the corner or to most Christians within the corner would be like Islam, or would be Mormons, or would be, something that's like well outside the bounds of Christianity. But it's not. Like Sam is inherently more threatening because he's like right on the border of something. Like, is he in or is he out? Like he actually considers Jesus as his Lord and Savior. But then most Christians are like, he's not Trinitarian, so he's out. So it's very interesting thing of like, are you in or out? And I think the Jewish people have enriched the United States, but have still had that Jewish identity be a core aspect of who they are, both individually and as a people. And so, whereas most Americans, they like, let's say your ancestors were Italian, but that was 100 years ago, and your family is intermarried, and it's like, well, am I still Italian anymore? Like, where's my like fallback identity? You know, when America crumbles, like where's the other aspect of me that is a container that holds me and helps me be who I am to be? And so like I see that resentment just mostly being a resentment of, I see the resentment of the Jewish people mostly being a resentment of like, we've lost our identity, but you get to have yours, sort of thing. And so it is a scapegoat mechanism, and it is resentment based. And that's why I worry more so about like resentment than anything else. Like collective resentment is like, man, it is the worst. It's such a disease, because it doesn't matter what the scapegoat is. Like collective resentment is going to destroy good things, whatever it is. Yeah. So thoughts?
I could only be worried then what will happen if the economy goes sideways in America, because that will not lead to happy people. It will just lead to more and more resentment. But I mean, Jacob said something which before he said it, I sort of was just hearing him talk, and I saw where he was going, which was about Australia and what happened there, the massacre over there. Jacob said, like, it wasn't surprising. Like, that's sort of like what we were expecting. So you could say it's just resentment, yet it seems like this resentment always ends up with Jews being killed. And
I will say it affects you disproportionately to the average. Yep. I think that's true.
Well,
What?
the economy is in dire straits. A lot of hiding it by the authorities, but America is going to be relatively fine. You have the natural resources, you have the human resources, you have you can have easily secure borders. There is one thing is worse than people rising up in resentment, and that is having no one left to rise in resentment. What is going to happen in Europe is that the economic situation there is much, much worse. No prospects for improvement whatsoever, and there is no layer of angry young men to rise up in resentment. Just they have passed a point of no return. So yes, in America, things are going to be complicated and hard, and you're going to win this.
I'm shifting this for a moment, though, Neil. So, like your namesake, building yourself wax wings and flying above us. Tell us what you see from this conversation, and more specifically, what I was talking to Jacob specifically about his disappointment in the corner, not feeling seen, so to speak.
Can you elaborate? Sorry,
Well, as people in this corner, as someone that works very hard on, let's say, building a culture and a community vibe, so to speak, within the culture, comes Jacob, but more specifically in this sense, Jacob, a non-Zionist, not a Zionist, Yosef, an American Jew, Chazi, like an American Orthodox Jew, Chazi, a Zionist, Messianist, even though Jacob is also probably a Messianist, and a Zionist Orthodox Jew, and you have Yoav, an Israeli Jew, and so these all voices come out and say like, hey, anti-Semitism alarm from people in like our orbit, and like, you know, and people with status in our orbit, you know, not good. That looks really bad. And then Yosef saying, and then within the conversation, within the, you know, the voice groups or the Discord, I'm seeing like, you know, this conversations keep on being brought up, yet like I'm not feeling like, hey, like not like, you know, now with our brothers and sisters over here. So there's a sense of like, but okay, so years of dialogue, right? We're saying like we're exposing the quote unquote the mysterious Jew. We're having this open dialogue. You're hearing the different voices. Yet in this community, when this is happening right now, we're not hearing. Where's like the support? Where's like, no, this is nonsense. Like the attitude would be, so to speak, that like all the TLC participants, potentially, even though they're allowed to have, of course, different opinions, we have their own opinions, when they hear this anti-Semitism coming out, we know, hey, listen, we've already invested in relationships with like hundreds of Christians multiplied by their families, right? We should have like an army of, let's say, 5,000, 6,000 people out there fighting the good fight. Yet it feels like silence.
Why do you like what is it that you would like Christians to do? Because I'm not at all convinced that. So Jesus has this saying, resist not evil. And yeah, you might disagree with that saying, but it has to do with opponent processing, I think, because to resist something gives it ample reason to grow and fight back. And there's also another saying, you know, all that's in the darkness will be brought to the light. You know, when I was in my early 20s, I was on 4chan occasionally, and I had friends that were much more on 4chan, and all this crap was there. It was just under the surface, you know. So the question is like, is it more dangerous out in the open, or is it more dangerous bubbling under the surface with no one discussing it? I don't know the answer to that question. I really don't. I realize it's not pleasant. I realize that, but I'm also not convinced I know the answer in terms of what makes it better. I'm thoroughly convinced that cracking down on freedom of expression will not make it better. I think the best bet is to, you know, have an alternative that's better. You know, whatever the alternative is, that's better. And I don't think the alternative is political. And in fact, like we've been playing the political game as a race to the bottom for the last 20 years. And this is why I'm like increasingly invested in TLC, because I think the answer is a smaller level of principality where an individual directly has a stake in the future and direction of that principality, but then B, like you were saying, has direct relationships with people within that body. So yeah, you like one could say, okay, you got to pick a side. Which side are you on? The Israeli side or the Palestinian side? But a third option would be like, well, this particular conflict is not. It's just not something that impacts my day-to-day life. So I'm gonna wait and see. Also within the New Testament, Mary, so the mother of Jesus, they repeat this over and over and over, where it says, and she kept these things in her heart, and she pondered them in her heart. And like this sense that like we all need to like rush to like this, we got to do this to solve the problem. It's like, are you sure that will solve the problem? I see a lot of political. I see the main trend is political hubris in all ways, shapes, or forms. And I'm not saying that there's not a line. I'm not saying that. Like there clearly are lines. I do believe in thresholds, where you know like things. There's a threshold for war. And there's a threshold for conversation, and there's a threat. And I think that exists. I think that But I really believe in tolerance. Like I really believe it. And oftentimes the 20-something young man who's saying stupid stuff in their 20s and is just resentment and angry because they weren't raised with a father and their prospects are not as good as the previous generation. Often that person grows out of it. And, so this is why I'm a Christian, because I believe in forgiveness, like I don't know what else to, and I believe in like, what's the word? Epistemological humility or political humility. I don't know for certain what makes things better aside from like better relationships with individual people. So,
but I appreciate that. I would ask though to then say, okay, when you're saying, listen, it's tough, I don't really know where to land on this. Then I would argue, like, but right, when you hear these four voices say, like, you should land here, and you're like, well, I don't know. I'll be like, well, no, that's
what's the here?
Well, forget, like, again, I'm not even going into trying to think of a good example, one that's very practical and one that's more general.
So let me give an example.
Sure.
I 100% agree, and I don't know why it keeps on being brought up. Like, free speech is important. Nick Fuentes should be allowed to say whatever he wants to say. Candace Owens should be allowed to say whatever she wants to say. At the same time, the Macrons should be able to sue her into oblivion for saying things which are obviously wrong. Because just because you say you have the right to say something doesn't mean you shouldn't bear some responsibility for saying things which are somewhat truthful. So for me, the question becomes not, okay, Candace Owens. It becomes, can we all agree that what Candace Owens is doing is a sin? That I think
I can say affirmatively yes to that.
Okay.
100%.
So I would expect her not, I would expect her church to and a lot of these people, Nick Fuentes claims to be a Catholic.
Jacob, bring it back into the TLC when I'm saying to Neil, like, when you say they should call it out as sin, and you're asking Neil, like, what does there mean? There means, like, come out and say, hey, what this person's saying is nuts.
Well, I prefer the word sinful.
Sure.
I actually prefer that too, because I think it's sinful to speculate about things that you don't know and to cast dispersions and slander. So yeah, no, I agree. I don't know the right authority to do that. So maybe I'm strange in this regard. I thought there were a lot more people like this in TLC, which is like, the way I describe myself is an agentic libertarian, meaning that if the consequences of people's actions, God is going to do a better job of carrying out the consequences of people's actions than anyone else, especially the mob. But I agree, Jacob, that if that person is subordinate to a religious authority, that religious authority has full right to rebuke, correct, But at the same time, I'm a staunch believer in the separation of church and state, meaning there's a difference between the freedom to sin and, this is so hard. Like, we all just want to, like, outlaw the bad thing.
But nobody's talking about outlawing anything.
Sure.
I'm not talking about outlawing. Like, when I heard, I don't know who said somebody's trying to make anti-Semitism illegal. Like, I don't even understand what that means. Right? How that would in any way function, right? And so when people bring that up, I wonder why they're even bringing it up. It's, TLC isn't a church, but it is a community. And in our community to some extent. Certainly in my community, excommunication is real. On my Discord server, it's real. On my channel, it's real.
But so,
Right.
so Jacob, what then would you want to hear from Neil?
From Neil?
Well, Neil being representative of like part of the community, right? Not Neil.
Well, I certainly wouldn't want to hear "resist not evil." Like that just sounds evil to me.
That's why I'm a Christian. I don't know what to
I-
tell you.
I am
We
not
have
sure most
ideological
Christians-
differences, you know,
I'm
that
not
we
sure
are.
most Christians agree with how you're presenting "resist not evil."
Well,
No, I
if
was
I can-
very sorry. I
Go
was
ahead, go.
very careful not to answer the question what I expect you to do, because I really don't expect you to do anything. First, it's not my place, and second, I don't really know you. What I think that if I come to know somebody within the TLC who I think is on the same page with me, that in the way that we think in the same way, then I can give him advice that I would have given myself, and that is a person like Sam or like Young God, which people are just like to investigate stuff. They like to learn. And to them I say, well, if there is an issue, dive into it. Like, I don't want to bring Israel again. So if there is a war going on in South America, study the issue. Why are we going to war? What are the players? It's always more complicated than you think. What is China thinking about this? What is Russia thinking about it? What is the neighbors of that country thinking about it? And it's a full day's job. Any single issue is a research project that can take you months. And that is an advice they can give to a selected number of people who like to do this, who like to dive into subjects. Otherwise, I have nothing to say.
Well, I think, first of all, Yoav, thank you for adding that. I think, Neil, you're touching upon something very, I mean, this is what I think part of the tension is, right? We do have a different theology, and and I have this issue with Luke, which I love very much. Yet, like, his turn the other cheek idea, right, is obviously like we just fundamentally see the world differently. And Jacob, obviously, this is like an issue, right? Which is when it comes to, I think specifically with the suffering of others, right? Like, I think like the Pope can't help but come out and say like, hey, you should stop this here. It doesn't matter even if, like, quote unquote, we're right. It just has to stop. Like that, like you cannot. So, that, then you're right that it's very hard. It would be wrong for me to look for sympathy when maybe sympathy is the wrong word, but like, I'm sure you're sympathetic, Neil. But I'm saying it's not that I could come and say like, I'm not going to call that out because, that's just not my mindset. And Jacob, that's what I would say, that this goes back to the identity thing, Neil, you were talking about earlier, which is the Jews are different. And they do look at the world differently. And I understand there's a difference between religious Jews and let's say, and not observant Jews, but I would say built into the Jewish experience and how they see the world is also fundamentally different. And that's specifically now also that causes like a tremendous amount of tension.
When I say,
Jacob, like, I don't know what you think about that. Like, can you, like, granted that you're saying there's other Christians that would read it differently than Neil, but we also know that there's people that interpret it like Neil. And then what could we ask from him if that's how he sees the world?
if I can clarify something, when I say resist not evil, if I was a rabbi of a local synagogue, I would have an armed guard, or I would have whatever I felt it was necessary to protect my people at that synagogue. So I'm not saying that shepherds don't have the responsibility and the right to defend their sheep. I'm not saying that. It's more so at a level of principality up, where so let's take wokeism for instance, right? So let's say you were part of the 3% of Americans that were like, die in the wool, like woke all the way down, 100%, and they want to make all of America think in that same way, right? So they're into the HR departments, they're into the university administration, they're into this, into that. And do you think that the things that they believed in, which are like true equality of outcome, that everyone will be brought to that equality, under the sun, do you think we're closer to that as a result of them fighting for the last 15 years or further away? I'm saying that because you don't even need to think about this in Christian terms. You can just think about it in terms of Sun Tzu terms. Like, because of how effective or how staunchly they tried to advance a particular agenda, they overplayed their hand. And now we're into the reverse of the identity politics, where it's like, oh, you want to play identity politics? Okay. Are you sure that you're ready to play that game? And that's where we are now. So like what I mean by I am very pragmatic about this. And I do not want to see like white people unite. Fuck that shit. Like I am a classical liberal. I am a post World War II. I love America, man. Like I love the fact that we stole the best minds from the Nazis and we built modern America. Like, that's awesome. And the opportunities that have been given to countless people here. Are there things I don't like about America? 100%. But I believe in the spirit of meritocracy. I believe in the spirit of, everyone should have a fair shake at life, but everybody should bring their talents to the table for the, and I don't want to go to a world where it's really tribal identity politics. And so like, yeah, no, that's it.
Classical liberalism is a dead duck. So we are two classical liberalists in this broadcast.
I don't think it is, though. I really don't think it is. I think that's more of a catchphrase that people are, but how they live their life. Like if Claire goes to a McDonald's and the person that opens the McDonald's window is wearing a yarmulke, will Claire said, "Oh, I have the wrong restaurant. I'm going to go to a different." Like she does, maybe she does that. I don't know. But like most people, when it comes down to brass tacks, still are classically liberal in how they live their life. But I want that to stay, and I think that, yeah.
But
would I appoint a special FBI task force for rooting out organized threats against the Jewish people? Absolutely. You know what I mean? Like, but to say that we're gonna, I don't know how to solve the problem of extra resentment that's aimed at a particular group of people. Like, I don't know how to solve that problem without making it worse. Like, yeah, like the Civil Rights Act in the United States, or civil rights in the United States. Most people would say that they think that the marches and the speeches and all that, like that's what actually changed people's minds. And I don't think that's true. I think that's a nice story that we say that it's the marches and the speeches. What I think it was is the suffering of African Americans, and that suffering being on photographs, on video, and the assassination of Martin Luther King. I think it's the suffering that makes its way into the Christian mind psyche, and we cannot turn away from that, and our hearts and minds are changed. And that's what I genuinely think happened in civil rights. It's the exposure of the suffering that changed. And so that's like the triumph of Jesus. Now I get that you're not Christians. I get it.
No, but I would challenge it differently. One, I would agree with that, which is I think with TikTok and social media as we know it today, like it's like seeing the pictures out of Gaza, it was too much for the world to handle. Like it's too much. We're not wired to be exposed to that, right? So like it doesn't matter what side you're on, you're like, I can't handle this amount of carnage. But I would ask, like, where's the Holocaust happened, right? Everyone's like, it's horrible, never again, never again, never again. So that lasted, we know never again means like 70 years. And then it starts like, does that number even real? Is it 6 million? Are they even Jews? They're even European. They're not Jews at all. So I wonder, like, where is those pictures that just like it's singed through and people
So
like.
I want to clarify something. So Isaiah 53 is actually part of the Jewish Bible, right? The suffering servant is something we do believe in. And we do see ourselves living, if instead of resist not evil, you had said, pick up your cross and bear it. To some extent, I have been saying the same thing to the Jewish community. The fact is that on October 7th, as opposed to there being a outpouring of outrage at the people who committed the atrocities and any sort of sympathy towards Israelis whatsoever, we saw the absolute opposite. Like on October 8th, there were people celebrating. There were people who were, it was amazing and fun, honestly caused shell shock. Because while there is this idea of suffering servant and having, I've said this many times, and I don't know why I keep on needing to repeat it. I wish Christians spent more time talking about Christians being murdered than they did about anybody in Israel or Palestine. And part of what is surprising to me is I can't even seem to, like, the salience, the relevance realization within Christianity isn't even there to the point of, hey, there are these Christians who are being persecuted, and let's actually even care that that's going on and, send them help in any way.
I think you're being a little bit unfair to Christianity. I mean, we do. We even Christians have in-group preference, we do. And in the amount, it's not you don't hear about it, but if you look up how much money has been donated by Christian churches, Protestant, Catholic, Orthodox, how much money and time and manpower has been donated by Christian churches from richer parts of the country to poorer regions, it's astronomical. I'm sure it's in the tens of billions. It's a huge amount of money.
I hold on. I'm not saying Christians. No, Christians are certainly very charitable. I'm not seeing. To be clear, if there were as many Jews being killed in Nigeria as there are Christians being killed in Nigeria, I would expect it to be a common topic of conversation. I don't think it is. And if I'm being unfair, I'm sorry. Maybe in your churches they are talking about the massacre.
I mean, in the common cultural parlance and lexicon, like the slaughter of people in Sudan, how many more people have died in Sudan than in Israel, Palestine? It's probably a factor of 50 more. And they probably get 1/50th the conversational capacity. And it's because, but actually you and Hezi were having this discussion earlier, Jacob. I think Hezi was correct in that, anti-Semitism is, it doesn't, the facts on the ground are secondary to the psychology of it, the thinking of it. Like you could be right factually, but anti-Semitism is what's the word I'm looking for? An egregore.
Yeah, I think that is.
It's a perception thing. The
it's
subjective
it's
is,
spirit.
But then how, if that's true, Neil, then going back to what you said earlier, which is like, I'm not sure, if I focus on it, I'm not sure if I'm helping it. But if we know that it's like already ingrained and built in, and it does, like the facts that you bring at it don't matter, then maybe you do need to focus on it. Maybe not focus on it.
Like if I give you all the arguments why you should convert and be a Christian, is that going to be more effective than me like just loving you, Hezi? Like you know what I mean? That I've lost faith in the propositional. Like this is probably Vervaeke and Peterson, and I've lost faith in the propositional as like the best weapon to convince people otherwise. And I'm not trying to convert you guys, by the way, but like I'm using that as an extreme example to be like, why do we still believe the propositional works? Like we've had like 7 years of education on this.
Well, okay, so I will say I dislike the fact that the response to propositional tyranny has been propositional negation, which is, yeah, the propositional is not the only thing that works. It is not, it may not even be the thing that works best, but yeah, no, the propositional does actually work, and it is necessary, and it is part of life.
But even Neil, so to your point, right? So if let's say your response to what was going on was like, you know what? I'm going to have Hezi on right now. And again, I only have total love for you. I'm not saying that this is what I want you to do right now. But why don't I be like, and I'm just going to participate showing the love, right? I'm not going to come and say like, Wingram, I'm just going to have a beautiful conversation like I have with Hezi in the past. And I'm going to showcase, look at this beautiful relationship. Now, I believe, and this is why I'm here, that that's what's happening over here, right? Like I'm having these conversations and we're reaching out, we're building this, like this, the reason I love this place is this is a place where people are seeking the master of the universe and love God. And to me, that's like, okay, that's the win, right? So, but I would want that to carry enough weight where it's like, okay, if I know that to be true about Hezi, then he's on a 4-hour stream right now saying like, no, like there's no anti-Semitism. Now I'm not saying, or there's no genocide. I'm not now saying that you have to decide and agree with that fact. I'm just saying that like, then you would be like, well, I should try to somehow focus on this and try to show that this person here is not this evildoer or doesn't think like those evildoers are what they're saying they're doing. Again, I'm spitballing over here, but to me, it's, like a non-response, I don't know, to anti-Semitism, it just seems like that hasn't been working out for the last like 3,000 years. So like, but to be honest, it's a feature, not a bug. I don't see that as like necessarily a problem. Like that's built into our story.
Honestly, I think you guys being part of TLC and engaging in it are like, this is the best strategy that I know of. Like, I don't have a better strategy,
Well, that's what Jacob was hoping for in a certain sense, I would think, which is like, right, because we're involved over here, not that this is what we're thinking, but I would hope that a byproduct of this relationship would be that there's some sort of cachet that you've managed to collect, which you could then use in this moment, right? My wife.
So my hope, my hope is to call young men into TLC, like 20s, and I hope the thing that I hope does that is the fact that the relationships here are actually better and more interesting and more fruitful and enriching and challenging, challenging and brave, and they require courage and growth and all those things, versus like always being in the same, tribe of, let's say, gamers that don't actually do anything and just complain about the same things and laugh at the same jokes. And it's just, it's not productive. It doesn't produce anything that's new, original, useful. So I want to be that ground where the kids that want something better get called into, regardless of whether they were anti-Semitic or nasty or like I believe in repentance. Like I believe that people can be changed by other people through time. Like that's what I want. It's like, come on, it's better over here. Like it's better. And honestly, like my mental health has been very much improved with the relationships that I've made in this space. Because like I care more about like the people and the relationships, the individual people that I've met, than I care about like all the bullshit on the outside. So like I'm not against the in-group and out-group dynamic, but like I'm against it when there's no invitation to the out-group to be like, no, it's actually better over here. Like it has to be somewhat permeable. And I think, like with Peterson and Ark, I think they spoke about the classical liberal tradition, but I think we're actually doing it. And I think the other thing that and this is maybe just me, like I'm projecting this next thing, but I think a lot of people who still believe in classical liberalism think that the right solution to the current identity crisis, current meaning crisis, is to fight tooth and nail against postmodernism. And that I think we are past, like I have crossed that bridge within my mind, that we are already, it's kind of like being in the storm and then saying like, oh, we should go back. We should get out of the storm. No. We got to go straight through postmodernism. I'm telling you, like we got to go straight through it. It's like anyone who doesn't have faith and plays the postmodern game, I will play that game until they are brought to their knees for the necessity of faith. Like we can go as far with the postmodern game as you want to go. And at the end of the day, the only thing that's going to save you from your own suffering and your own hell is faith. That's it. That's what's going to save you. And so like that's what I mean by going through and then calling other people to join us as we go through it. Anyway, so that's like my crazy hope. And it does require all of our traditions to be moving through, relatively together. We don't have to be perfectly together, but like not, yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
I do have to go. You guys keep on going if you can. It's been a great discussion. Thank you for participating, Neil. And later.
It is.
Thanks for the invite, Jacob.
Yo, I don't know if you can concur. It's 12:30 by us right now, so I think it's also a good time to land the plane, as they say. I appreciate it, Neil. I hope I didn't come off sounding. I hope I wasn't offensive in any way.
Not at all. Not at all.
And sorry, Yo, you want to say something?
Yeah. My conclusion is that I think the money that is ahead of us all is Mr. Sartori. He's already thinking about, okay, we want to those people not to be resentful. We want them to be contribute to society. We need to supply them with jobs, and we need to supply them with housing. And this is what is going on and on and on and on for hours. How do you supply these people with jobs and houses? So he's ahead of the curve.
I just challenge that a little, Yoav, with our personal relationship with offering. We had this conception of if we just offer people more money and jobs, right, then we could buy peace as well. Right now, you could say that there's that's a different can of worms because there's an indoctrination and kids are being taught a tremendous amount of hate from a young age, but that blew up in our face, literally, right? Having people work.
No. I was not talking about money. I mean,
I'm not also talking about money. I'm talking about job.
when I say job in housing is letting a man stand on his feet. It's not welfare.
I'm interested, Neil, when you say like, my mission is now to bring in the Groypers, right? Like I want them all in the TLC.
It's not. It's actually. I would say my mission is anyone nihilistic. That's a better way of putting it. Because what I'm really looking for is people who are in the pit, who are crying out in the darkness and saying, Lord, there's got to be something better than what I'm in. And so that pit can be a lot of things to a lot of people.
Right. So I'm very sensitive to that, and I could fully understand how there could be someone that is espousing anti-Semitism and really has no idea what he's talking about, and he has a pure, beautiful heart, and that's all good, right? I don't see that person as my enemy necessarily, right? I understand that he's lost, and right, it would be amazing. I've mentioned this in the past, this idea in Judaism, which is know that there's a kernel of good in all person, even in someone that's completely wicked. You have to find some kernel of good in him, and then by identifying that and letting him identify that in himself, you could actually chase his framework and actually elevate him to repent. So that's fantastic. One is dangerous work, right? Diving into I don't know who's taken on that job to reform Hitler necessarily. You know what I mean? Like it's out there. So I appreciate that. And I do think like Jacob pointed this out, but I also think it's like Ben Shapiro as an example, but also anyone here. I'm not saying Nick Fuentes shouldn't have a platform, or Nick Fuentes not at all, but off ramping, so to speak, or on ramping into something healthier like the TLC. So how do you see going about that? Is it just like I gotta wait and see, and I have like you just said, I'm the one waiting by the door, right? I'm just making sure that people are coming in, and when they come, they come. Because do you find like you're casting the right net, or is this like if it happens, great. If not, not.
So if I was an excellent carpenter, then I would teach people carpentry skills through YouTube, and I would sprinkle in my personality along the way, and then encourage them to come check out this alternative channel that I have. Or if I was a excellent botanist, I would go out into nature and I'd showcase all the different plants and flowers. And if I knew how to build video games, I would teach people how to build video games on an alternative channel, and teach them that in order to build a video game, you actually need to think arenically and agentically. And there's this group of people that does it oh so well and could enrich you philosophically such that you'd be a better video game developer. So that last one is me. I'm going to fail, obviously, but we'll see. It's going to be fun.
Trying to think how I do that with architecture and design. Look at this house. No, think about God. No.
Look at this house. Think about God. No. Don't these arches arch toward heaven, sir?
I mean, I have this whole song and dance for my clients over here, just because it's such a. I've said this in the past. It's such a materialistic field, which I have a very hard time into that. But my narrative, I see it. The specific narrative I use, I see as not being helpful for people that are trying to detransition from a Jew hatred, because mine is very Jewish focused. Yeah, listen, I love being in this space. I think it's important.
I'd love to do a conversation with both of you individually at some point, but
at some point,
because I've gotten to know Hezi more so over the past 2 years. But Yoav, you've been more frequent, but I haven't really talked with either of you guys individually about like your life, what you care about, stuff that's not political, just like normal stuff. But I'd love to do that. So, yeah.
before we wrap up, first of all, I know this conversation was not heavy on bringing up comments. So excuse us, but this was more of a focused conversation. But we appreciate all you.
I was doing my best.
No, you were, and Mark also participated nicely. With regards to Claire, who had a lot of questions to Neil, she wants to talk to you. You can decide what you want to do with that. But Claire, yes,
I'd be. I'm happy to talk to Claire. My general policy with my channel is I get to talk with my friends. I don't think of Claire as a friend yet, and it's yet. So
who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows, Claire? If you send him a Facebook invitation, if people still do that, maybe you guys will become friends. But Claire, I'm sure Neil knows that you would also serve someone with a yarmulke on his head. He was saying that in jest, and yes. So Claire, I appreciate that you were here as well. We see you. The fact that we don't engage with every comment you say doesn't mean we don't see you and don't wish the best for you.
I just realized I committed a sin. I think I've got dirty socks hanging by my head. So my apologies.
I mean, I noted it.
I had to smell that on the stream. my fault.
Claire is a worse actor than Fuentes. Ooh, wah, shots fired. Bam, bam, bam. Guys, come on now. It's all about love and peace in this channel. We don't want to be, by the way, I don't know. Maybe Nick Fuentes will find a way here too. And I'll be glad to have a conversation with him and tell him how he's wrong with his understanding of Kabbalah.
I think his inroad would be Sartori Studios. That's a joke.
I'm with you. By the way, was Jesus known as a good carpenter?
I don't know.
Not the best carpenter? You would think
Well, okay, the way I interpret that. So first of all, he's like a craftsman. So he worked primarily with wood, but also stone, metal. He's just a general contractor.
Right, but was he great at it though? Okay,
wait. So I want to throw something at you, which is theologically, God as the creator of the world, right? So Jesus starts out as this craftsman, comes into the world, does this 3-year ministry. The way Jesus ends his ministry, I can't preach to Yoav yet, but the way Jesus ends his ministry is he's gardening in the garden after the resurrection. And Mary Magdalene says to the random gardener, she's like, they stole our savior. And Jesus looks at her and he's like, Mary, don't you? And I just imagine Jesus not having much time left on earth. And he's just gardening because that's what originally we were supposed to do, is just sit and eat and garden, and take care of the animals and stuff. And he doesn't have that much time, but he's just appreciating the creation in those moments in the garden. And I really like that image. I could totally see myself 80 years old, just gardening, being like, yeah, I trust you, Lord, whatever happens with the world, but I'm going to enjoy the garden while I've got a few years.
From a practical perspective, I can see myself coming up to Jesus and saying, listen, I don't know about this resurrection stuff. I know that I have a kitchen that needs to be installed in 2 weeks, and you promised me that this is going to go in. I'm just hoping that it was next level craftsmanship. You know what I mean? There's no discussion about that. And that bowl that he made.
Yeah.
Damn, it was perfect.
This is a funny question. I can get in trouble for this, but okay, did Jesus play tag and scrape his knee? And did Jesus miss, if he was playing ball or something, did he miss the catch? Did he make any mistakes whatsoever? But how can you be human without making mistakes?
Correct, but I would feel you would answer that by because the real question is, how does God die, right? But once he's in his human form, presumably he's cracking jokes as well. So I would assume
one would hope, yeah.
Right, but it would be strange though, right? If he was I used the wrong nail. And you're like, come on, Jesus. I don't know. If someone knows about if there's if someone is aware, I know there's the Shroud of Turin, but there's also the 3-legged chair that Jesus made from one angry client.
Oh, I didn't know about the chair. No, I actually
I don't know about a chair.
I believe in the shroud now. There's some compelling evidence on that.
Yeah, thing. I saw that there's that's going around. A lot of people talking about that shroud. Anyway,
I don't mean to come on here and
no. I guess best of luck. best of luck with that discovery. I hope I hope it works out. I got you. Neil should have starred in Last Samurai. All right.
I can't grow enough facial hair.
I guess you
My
look
problem.
like Tom
I got
Cruise.
stubble.
Maybe saying.
Okay. I will looking forward to meeting you some other opportunity just to tickle your curiosity. This is what I do for a living.
Oh wow. Do you really do that for a living? Is it supposed to be an Asian man?
It's a bit of
You know I'm
plastic.
gonna
It's
clip
not-
that now, right? Like I totally have to use that for worldly news.
You should be like, as talking to the Jews, I finally realized how the Mossad was doing this.
Yeah,
Yoav is the supplier for all the masks that are
yeah.
Yeah, I mean the bit even writes itself. It's like Yoav's mask comes off. We get to know the true Yoav.
Exactly. It'd be scarier if under that mask was another mask with that same face. And then we wouldn't know how deep the rabbit hole goes. All right. I promised myself I would work, and that was 2 hours ago. Lies.
Well, have a good night, gentlemen.
Bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.
All right. Fantastico. Again, thank you all for participating. I hope you guys found this informative. Mark, I'm sure you didn't find this as generative, hopefully entertaining. And if not entertaining, I hope not annoying or insulting. Jon, at some point you made me laugh. I can't remember exactly when, but you got me. Maybe it was wanting to make Yoav laugh that made me laugh. But I appreciate you being here as well. And Ronnie Sopel, you seem, it's sickening to see Jews make excuses. Okay, wow. Yeah, you seem to be very upset. I don't know really what to tell you, man. You seem to just be very mad, even though that's a good line that Yoav was the man in the end of Scooby-Doo, right? Removing the mask. I get that. But I don't know. I think I would hope you would find in Yosef and I and Yoav people that are very trying to take a very nuanced take and be understanding and see things from different perspectives, participate in steel manning before they open up their mouth. But perhaps we're wrong, and you are correct. Could they please hold their feet on the fires of their bigotry? I don't know. I would hope people would see me as being somewhat representative of what many in my community think, or what many Jews in Israel think. But I feel like, well, I know Claire thinks I'm all things to all people. I don't think that's true, but I would hope people see that we all think, and this, I'm focusing specifically right now about Israel Palestine, but I only want long lives, peace, and tranquility to my Muslim brothers and sisters, inshallah. And I hope that together, both Ishmael and Isaac could return to the tent of Abraham. And of course, that also relates to my Christian brothers and sisters, who all of us together ultimately need to do our best to make our path towards God, and ideally doing that together. But that is what we want. And we want a house of prayer for all nations. Everyone gets to pray there and call out to God's name. And I believe that is doable. And yes, this course is also relates to the Noahide framework. That is really what we want, not world domination, but just the world, the nations of the world will be blessed through you. It's again, there's no supremacy there. We're just there to share the blessing with everyone. And really, it very much, it's no one wins until everyone wins. And that is what we want. As I tell also Muslims, who am I to reject what Allah or Hashem has to say? And when the third temple is built, whoever is that messenger, obviously we'll do what we're told. I'm not looking to knock down or destroy the Dome of the Rock at this point in time. I just want to be praying there together with my Muslim brother and sister. Well, I can't go into the Dome of the Rock, but on the Temple Mount, I just want to dive in close to the Source Stone, to where God's presence was, together with my Muslim brothers and sisters. As we know, they used to pray towards Jerusalem. And I'm interested in returning to even Muhammad, peace be upon him's understanding of his mission. There's Mecca and Medina, Muhammad, and I'm looking for a more of the original version where we could keep our Sharia of 613 and the Christians could keep their Sharia and the Muslims could keep their Sharia, with, of course, tweaks here and there. But we need to be doing that together. We need to be learning together, and that's why I really much enjoy the time in the TLC, because we get to learn more about each other, and I think it's very much needed with Muslims as well. We need to have a joint. We need to be learning together. We need to give them a real understanding of how Judaism actually sees itself and how we understand our religion, and not how they think they understand our religion. Yeah, I know, but this is where we'll obviously disagree. I mean, it's violence. I just think it, in many ways, it's justified violence. That doesn't mean that Israel couldn't have done better to avoid this situation in the past. So it's very unnecessary. They were in this position. But I don't want to really go down this, because I honestly don't think there's anything I could say that will convince you, to be honest. Like, I think if I showed you data and showed you stuff, I still wouldn't convince you. All I could say is that I care very much for my Muslim brothers and sisters. I participate and work with many Muslims and try to have as many authentic and real conversations as I can with them. Much to your surprise, I would say many of them agree or see things the way I see things, not necessarily when it comes to certain theological differences, but specifically with the war right now, there's just a different narrative out there that I think is hard to hear, but I'm not going to go down that line trying to convince you. I just appreciate that you are trying to engage. Right. So this is the problem, right? When you say things like this, it's bigger than Palestine, but Lebanon, Syria, Iran, Yemen, stop bombing innocent people. So that's the question. I disagree with you. And then you'd have to ask yourself, does Chazi like bombing innocent people? Or maybe I'm misreading that. Again, it could be I'm wrong. But seeing this character and this person and hearing him speak over the years, do you think that person who's taking what you're saying seriously and still disagrees with you, that he's just okay bombing innocent people? there's certain aspects to that. Excuse me. Just like there's certain aspects of the Jacob's right where this nation state of Israel is not the messianic state that I'm hoping for. These are all, I relate this back to the previous portion. As Joseph told his brothers, right? They threw him in a pit. They tried to kill him. He was sold to the Ishmaelites. He was brought down to Egypt. He was challenged. Like, the intention wasn't for him to rule. Nevertheless, he tells the brothers, don't worry about it because this was God's plan. So 2025, seeing the things that have unfolded, I use my grandfather as a prism for this. 103 years old, may he live and be well. He's seen the maps change and he's seen prophecies, unfold in his life. And for him, he couldn't be more sure of where we are right now. So when I look at where we are right now, I can't help but, while being aware of the American colony claim, that doesn't negate the fact that things are always in motion, and who are we to control how these things come about? Right. So again, just this number, 100K, obviously we'll have to be fair and remove Hamas and all the other terrorist groups that are in Gaza. Obviously, Hamas is not the only one. It's the largest one. It's not the only one. So first of all, let's remove all of them. Then when we're saying children, we also have to remove out of 100,000 all the natural deaths that happened over the last 2 years, right? Because that's part of that number as well. Then we would have to remove all, when we see us in the children that are listed, obviously any child that's participating in the war, as in like a 16-year-old kid could hold a gun, of course, all of them have to be removed. Then when we'll look at just that number, we'll have to compare it to other numbers that are in this situation. And then we'll have to look at those numbers and the combative ratio. And then we could have a discussion. And then we'll have to compare it to other countries, right? So throwing out that number, it's not a serious conversation. Is it horrible that out of that 100,000, let's say there's 40,000 or 50,000, I don't know. That is, let's say, quote unquote, innocent life. It's horrible. But then we also have to look at that. And then you have to lay on top of that, like the amount of bombs that were bombed, the size of these bombs, the fact that it's like 3 times more than Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Then considering how many people died there and how many people died here. Then the claim would be like, is Israel missing that badly? That like there isn't, just because based on those calculations, there could be like 7 million dead, but there isn't. Right? So then we would have to ask all these questions and try to understand what is actually happening over here. Or maybe this is hard for us to swallow. Maybe if we remove these numbers, if you're looking at 1 to 1, 1 to 2, 1 to 3 even ratio, maybe that's what the most precise battle looks like, which is horrible, but still amazing. And the leaflets and the calling and the checking and the doing, and then you get to that result, which is a little, it's ironic because part of me wants to be like, part of me knows that this battle and the battles that Israel in the last 2 years will be taught in West Point, will be taught in schools. This is what we want to get to, right? This is almost the impossible result, is to get to this ratio. Yet we are being condemned for that ratio. Just think about it. You don't have to respond. Maybe I'm full of lies, but that is the world we're living in today. And I would argue, and I always go back to this, the fact that we're in a world today where the word literally also means in the dictionary today figuratively is indicative of that issue, right? We have no sense of reality, right? People talking about like 100 number is crazy. I don't, compared to what? Compared to what's going on in the rest of the world, but not necessarily. And again, like the way that number is even used is very problematic. But I don't know. I could tell you that I think about these things, and I take them to heart. No, not in. By the way, I don't know about 2,500 or 3,000, but 2050 or even before that will be taught. I mean, the fact that the missiles are so precise is why Israel is are selling these weapons right now. Is because they're showing that they could. It's going to be hard to hear. So little death, relatively speaking, while using such weapons. Right? How fortunate the world is that we have the Iron Dome. Because think of the amount of death and destruction Israel would have if it didn't have that, and then think of the response that would have to happen alternatively. Right? It's an occupation. Right? Palestinians are not in ghettos. Again, like you would have to assume that what you're saying is true, and I just think they're in ghettos and I don't care, and we're just laughing and we're letting them get killed. It's just not the case. It's simply not the case. There has been so many attempts at peace, and we just want peace. That's what we want. Peace. Peace, peace, peace. Peace. I dare you to find me, right, a Palestinian. I don't even want to go there. Doesn't matter. We want peace. It doesn't matter they appealed to genocide scholars. And also that big report that came out was also debunked. Half of them weren't also even scholars. Some of them signed up the day before. Some of them had like ridiculous fake names. The way you should respond is just you have to do it step by step. You have to break down the number that they're throwing out, first of all, has to be broken down. It must be broken down. And you have to agree on those things. You can't just throw out numbers and say, like, these are all little kids that are dead. Once those numbers are broken down, you have to point out the weapon, just the bombs that were used. Just the heavy artillery, not bullets, not tank shells, just bombs, okay? The size of those bombs, how many pound bombs they are, how we know, like I said, the equivalency of those bombs is like the amount of nuclear bombs that were shot at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, much larger than that. And then start breaking down the math. There should be 7 million. Ask them to give you a conservative number then. How many people should die from one of these bombs? Then times that by the amount of bombs, show them that the number they're going to get to is over millions. Then point out that, right, we're not even there. Right? We're not even close to that. And if anything, since the beginning of the war, I think Gaza has already has had more kids. So like, you just have to break down the numbers, and you have to pass by the emotional thing of like, they're saying it's genocide. I want that's how I like to use the term genocide. These words matter. These terms matter. Here we go. Okay, so this is an example, okay? I see in every other legal mind in the world. Every other legal mind in the world. Do you hear yourself? Every legal mind in the world? First of all, no, there's a difference between international crimes and genocide, right? Could be an international crime happen. That's a completely separate conversation. And then again, I would ask for the same level of ire to all the other internet. Like I'm saying, I think is it the head of the chair of women's rights is like some sort of Arab state that doesn't have women's rights. Like, so they're deciding also what the international crimes are. It's not every legal mind. It's just a wrong statement. first of all, they didn't say Israel committed genocide. They're saying that's also not true. If you also read the reports, you even read the famine reports, they say it's stage 5. If it wasn't stage 5, it wouldn't be possible for it to be stage 5 based on the numbers they have. Again, like Yoav said, you could dig deep. If you really want to dig deep, you could dig deep. You have these articles have clickbait titles, and if you dig inside, they also don't make sense. They half the time contradict themselves as well. But like I said, it's not. That's why I'm asking you. What would you need to see to change your mind? And think about it. If there's nothing I could say, right? Then what's the point of the conversation? And then you have to ask yourself, okay, it must be that this person in front of me, Chazi, he's just a sociopath. He's crazy. And when it comes to Israel, Yosef is, and Yoav is, and Jacob is, they're just insane sociopaths that just are blind to everything. They won't handle any critique. They're okay getting into conversations, challenging their religion, robust conversation about challenging religion. They'll talk to Arabs, Muslims, they'll talk to Christians. They'll have arguments about the Trinity, and they'll have very open and pluralistic conversation about that. But when it comes to Israel, they automatically go blind, and they become sociopaths. I mean, that's what you have to be saying, right? Because I'm disagreeing with you, but like you have to ask yourself why. Why is Chazi disagreeing with me? He seems like such a nice, sensible man. So sad. All right. Yalla, let's speak. Catch you all later.